One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Friday edition of Down the Rabbit Hole here on the Orion Talk Radio Network, oriontalkradio.com. It is August 10th, 2011, and tonight I'm going to be breaking down all the mass shootings that have been happening, and I'm going to be bringing up a little bit of history and showing you how a lot of that ties into what's going on today and how this is all being done to pump out fear and to gain more control. And I couldn't think of anybody else better to go over all of this with than my good friend, and I'm just going to call him my sometime co-host because he's been coming on with me so often. So my sometimes co-host here on Down the Rabbit Hole, Mr. Holland Vandennieuwenhof. Holland, welcome back to the show, brother.
Thank you, Popeye. It's really indeed my pleasure to be back on here. This is one of my absolute favorite shows to be on, and you're one of my absolute favorite other radio hosts that I listen to.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate the compliment, and having you on and talking with you, we always brainstorm. We're always, it's easy to talk with you and actually go through a lot of this stuff because you know the history itself too. So I can say, I say something to you and that sparks a light bulb in your head, which then you say something to me and then, another light bulb goes off in my head and it's bing, 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 back and forth. Just like, in fact, before we came on tonight, I brought up the fact to you. I said, what's really interesting when you look at these shootings is when you look back in history at other shootings and there's big red flags and it seems to be connected with, to the same characters and the same playbook. What I'm talking about is the North Hollywood shootout from 1997. And when I looked into this, now I did a show on this last year. So the other day, when I was talking about the Sikh Indian shooting massacre that just happened, and it was Wednesday night, and I was sitting here, and as I was getting ready to do the show, I was looking at something. I think it was a clip, and something made me think of the North Hollywood shootout. I just don't know what it was, but all of a sudden it just popped into my head, and I was like, I did a show on that. I should go back and I should, look into it. So I had a chance to look into it a little bit before I went on air, and then after I went on air, I went back and listened to the old show, and I dug out my old notes and everything. These guys in the North Hollywood shootout were quote-unquote connected to the Montana militia. And guess who gave them the body armor, funded them, and gave them the weapons to pull off their little bank robberies and then this massive shootout with the police? The militia. And the only banks that they robbed, if I remember correctly, I know that they stayed in the Bank of America branches. That's where they kept robbing. And I don't think they robbed anything. If I remember my notes, I have to go back. But if I remember correctly, those were the only banks that they robbed were Bank of America's. So isn't that interesting?
Very interesting. Well, that is familiar to me. And I was unaware of that link. I was actually in the Marine Corps when that occurred. So I've never actually looked into that. But due to my research on the Oklahoma City bombing, I've learned about some of the operations that the FBI was running in that time period, the early to mid-late 90s, or before and after the Oklahoma City bombing. And those documents have come out. And if these North Hollywood bank robbers, I guess was that before or after the movie Heat?
Actually, it was after the movie Heat, and they used that movie to psych themselves up. They sat there, and it said that they would sit there and watch the movie over and over and over again to get themselves.
I can relate to that, man, because I distinctly recall watching the movie Heat a whole heck of a lot while I was in the Marine Corps. Me and my fellow grunts would be in the berthing area of some amphibious lamb ship and just watch that movie over and over, and it does pump you up. And then, like, the exact same thing played out on the streets of L.A., where you have a team of highly trained, well-armed individuals just slaying the cops in L.A. left and right and downtown, mind you. So that's interesting. But what I do know about FBI operations in that time period is that in the 1980s, the modern rise of the neo-Nazi right. Now, let me clarify some things to the audience. I'm giving a history of the neo-Nazi right, because I've had to study it. In no way is this an endorsement or defense of their beliefs or activities or ideology or anything. But I've spent some time with a lot of neo-Nazis trying to track down accomplices to Tim McVeigh in the Oklahoma City bombing, and some of those experiences got quite hairy. A lot very, very intriguing. A whole lot of them, some of them downright explosive. Anyways, so back to operations. In the mid-1980s, the modern rise of the neo-Nazi right started because of Robert J. Matthews and what he called the Order, which was a group of neo-Nazis going around the country, robbing banks to finance a new race war. They eventually all got shut up. I believe Matthews died on an island off Washington State. It was burned down by the FBI. This was in the mid-'80s time frame or early. Anyway, so after that, the neo-Nazi right started talking about resurrecting the Order. That gossip and word of mouth started going in the neo-Nazi circles up into the early 90s. So the FBI was terrified of another order, a genuine, threat, not a fake, contrived threat that they prop up so they can make themselves look at a real threat to their agents. Because these guys are deadly. So they decided to start a fake order to, I guess, kind of like Rumsfeld doctrine in the Iraq War, to propaganda, preemption, and all that stuff, the P3 or P2 doctrine, I believe. Anyways, the FBI preceded that, and they started a fake bank robbery group that went around. I believe it was called the American Republican Army or something like that, kind of generic but still racist sounding. And they started recruiting people all over the movement to start robbing banks to finance their anti-government activities. And some of this, and that's part of what McVeigh was working in his work undercover, perhaps, with the Midwestern bank robbers, also called the Aryan Republican Army. In fact, John Doe number 2 very likely was Richard Lee Guthrie, who was a friend of McVeigh, whom McVeigh mentioned in prison and who matches eyewitness descriptions.
You see, it's all connected. It all dovetails into each other. And it's not a surprise. I mean, anybody that's researched this, they look into it. It's amazing how a lot of the connections, not only to the players of the past, i.e. our current Attorney General, but a lot of the same, I guess, the motif that they used back in the day, the militia.
And they always use the same SOP. Mm-hmm. It doesn't evolve very fast.
No. Whoever writes up the SOPs, I should say, that's not rights. They wrote it up once, about 100 years ago, if not more, and they just keep using this old crappy playbook.
Yeah, Roger Charles, who recently put out a book earlier this year, I believe in July, called After Oklahoma City. You know, the Oklahoma City bombing, why it happened and why it still matters. Anyways, really good book in some ways. It was put through a major publishing house, so there was a lot of material he wasn't allowed to enter in. And Roger Charles was on the scene. He was an ABC producer. He broke a lot of stuff, especially on the Midwest bank robbery robbers that I was just talking about previously. And Roger Charles is a former Marine, professional journalist. He's worked and lived in D.C. for decades, and he knows he has a lot of inside connections, and that's why what made his book so good. But so he's familiar with the SOPs, and he basically said that every retiring agent in charge of whatever always leaves behind this certain folder that's not to be filed away with the other stuff. And in this folder is basically the memos and the SOPs telling you how to get away with stuff, what to do if this happens. If you get in trouble, do this. All this off the books methodology. So, and another thing is, it will only evolve as fast as it's ineffective. So it's still working, but we're catching up now. We're pointing it out. So it may evolve now. Who knows?
And that's the scary part is when you look at this. I shouldn't say scary. It's like a generic term, but weird, creepy, whatever part is when you look at this. That a lot of the same people, Holland, like are Holder. Yes. He was in power. That whole crew, all these people that are back, in the fold of things,
and they're doing the same thing, and it's magnified.
Yeah, okay. It's 2.0. What I mean?
Oklahoma
It's
City,
Clinton administration 2.0, OKC 2.0.
OKC it was run by the same people, the same kind of Justice Department. In some cases, in a lot of cases, the exact same people. They just moved up 2 or 3 notches in the ladder. Like Eric Holder, after the Oklahoma City bombing, he was sent to Oklahoma City to supervise the cover-up and the murder of Kenneth F. Trentadue, which we feature in our movie, A Noble Lie. You can see the trailer at nobleye.com. And what we see now is you're right, 2.0. Fast and Furious. I saw The Blaze today, and they're putting the body count at 3,000 people. Innocents, police chiefs, U.S. law enforcement officers, up to half a dozen maybe. Political officials, mayors, 3,000 people. And it's barely making a ripple now in the news. 17 years ago, the same crew ran Oklahoma City and killed a mere 168.
And let's not forget, did you see, I don't know, I think it was October of 2011, I don't remember the exact date, but James Corbett came out with a report through Sybil Edmonds' website, Boiling Frogs Post, and he did he does like a thing with them, and he did a report where he was talking about how Fast and Furious, it wasn't just going to be used to frame the Second Amendment. That was almost like a secondary thing. The real reason for it, and that's why, because it wasn't just the Obama administration. That's
Bush. It started under Bush,
exactly, and they were actually enabling one cartel to wipe out the rest.
The Sinaloa cartel was given a free rein, carte blanche, to run tons of drugs into this country for at least a half a dozen years, as documented. And I guess the son of one of the leaders is now in U.S. custody, and he is blabbing because he has been betrayed by his masters, who were the Justice Department and probably the CIA above that. See, we're only seeing the bottom or part of. Fast and Furious is an iceberg, and we're just now kind of feeling out the tip. It goes way deeper, man, way deeper. CIA-protected drug routes have been in existence for decades, since its inception. The OSS during World War II was running opium, and that's admitted.
That's how they pay for all the black operations. Otherwise, they have to go beg Congress for the money.
Yeah, and they're not going to. Yeah, those operations are not paid for out of Congress budgets.
It's not on the books. There is no record.
No.
That's what Iran Contra.
Exactly.
Thing. They got caught. And everybody says, it was the media tried to portray it and blow certain aspects of it out of proportion and only focus on certain things. But in reality, they were running drugs.
I mean, one of the planes that was used in extraordinary rendition a couple of years ago under the Bush regime, that was the CIA was kidnapping terror suspects overseas and shipping them by plane to prisons in places like Libya and Syria, which, by the way, are now our enemies, and having them tortured with a list of questions. And I think one of the major East or West Coast papers named, they actually found out that one of those planes crashed about a year later, and they matched it by tail number, but it crashed with a couple tons of coke on board.
Yeah, wasn't it like Colombia?
Plane.
Or Argentina?
I believe so.
Like a Central American country. There's pictures of it, dude.
A CIA plane crashes. And this happened at the beginning of the exposure of Iran-Contra, when Eugene Hassenfuss was recovered and captured from the wreckage of a plane shot down full of coke.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. And, you know, this is the CIA's been doing this going back a very long time. Again, even if you don't want to go back as far as World War II, which, again, the OSS was the predecessor to it. If that's not good enough for you, say you want something more recent. Okay, Vietnam. Vietnam was a huge drug war. Okay, it was disgusting what they were doing. They were running drugs, okay, out of Vietnam in the soldiers of dead Marines, in the bodies of dead soldiers and dead Marines. They were
putting them in the abdominal cavity.
And fill them up inside their body cavities with drugs. That's disgusting. That is absolutely disgusting. And everybody that took part in that should be swinging from a rope.
Exactly. And there was a big cleanup operation after that, too. Larry McDonald, Colonel Larry McDonald, I believe, his case, the one they wrote the book Fatal Vision about, he was framed in the murders of his family because he was a psychiatrist in the Special Forces interviewing drug addicts at Fort Bragg, the headquarters of Special Forces, and he was tracking down the sources of the drugs that were coming in and infecting all of these Army soldiers. And so they just framed him left and right, even made a movie about it.
And that's usually what happens, because no matter what, they'll expose the framing of the Second Amendment over what was going on with supporting the Sinaloa drug cartel, because they can't screw with that. That's their lifeblood, dude. You know what I mean? Nothing can interrupt.
Yeah, nothing can interrupt that flow of money. I mean, they run a vast worldwide enterprise. I'm talking about U.S. intelligence, CIA, NSA. And they have safe houses. They have armies under pay. They have, spooks in every corner of the world. They're running a vast enterprise, and that flow of money. They are a corporation. Think of it as that. It's kind of helpful to think about that. I think of government as mafia. Look at how organized crime works. You don't knock off the boss unless there's a sit down and everyone agrees. You always seek permission from higher up. There is a system, so the whole system doesn't degenerate into war.
Yep, so, and like the mafia, they occasionally knock each other off. Maybe this guy or that guy,
but they're careful about it.
Exactly, and when an outside force threatens any of their interests, they close ranks.
Oh yeah,
real fast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's what you see with these dirtbags.
Mm-hmm. That's how the system works. It's nothing original or new. Just look at something else that behaves in the same manner. I'm kind of an aficionado of mafia history because of that, because I see what they've done in the past, see what they're doing now. And honestly, they're involved in it anyway, so it's helpful to look at that. I mean, mafia is hip deep in drugs and working with the CIA ever since the late 50s and the assassination attempts against Fidel Castro.
Yep, because that's who they used to get in there. And of course, the mafia had a big leg in taking out Castro, because he threw out all the casinos, everything. Cuba used to be like almost like an old school version of what South Beach Miami is today, except maybe throw in a couple casinos.
Exactly. And it was a free-for-all. There was no inquisitive FBI agents poking around to see where the profits were going. There was none of that. I mean, just watch the movie Godfather 2. It's all about that. And that's exactly what happened. Those characters were based on real people and what was happening in Cuba.
Yeah, and Castro went there and cleaned house and threw them all out. Now, whether or not that was, he did it for a good reason or not, I mean, that's a complete different story. The point is he pissed off the certain
people. We're talking about cause and effect here.
Exactly, causality, the why of things.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you look at it, Holland, and you see this same cast of characters and the same playbook, especially from like the 90s, and you see what was going on in the 90s. See, I look at now like they've polished, they've polished their swords. They've honed their craft as it were. You know what I mean? Back in the 90s, it was the first couple attempts. They were screwing up. It was rough around the edges. Now it's 2.0. Mm-hmm. And they're still a bunch of a-holes, but the point is, to the general public, it's much easier to fool the public, and with the brainwashing of everybody, nobody's going to look into who Gary Webb was, why he died.
No, not at all. And who knows? It may have been a suicide. He may have been murdered. I mean, there are cases where people have shot themselves in the mouth in attempted suicide, and then
from my research, it was in the back of the head.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with a pump shotgun. So, I mean, I
thought it was 2 shots with the .38. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was from what I've uncovered. It was 2 hits to the back of the noodle with a pump shotgun, and they said,
well, that is logistically challenging.
Well, that's usually after the first one to the head with a shotgun at some close range, you're not going to have the motor skills to be sliding the action back and pumping in round number 2, but especially from behind. Like, what are you, Plastic Man? How do you hold like a 3-foot-long rifle, or a long gun, I should say, behind your head?
Well, with the barrel of a legally mandated 18 inches at least.
Yeah, what are you, Plastic Man? I mean, you'd have to be abnormally, mutant arm man or something to be able to pull it off. And yeah, I know Gary Webb. They say he was depressed and all, but honestly, from what I've seen, I think they killed him, and it was because he was exposing stuff that I mean, you can't. The things he was talking about.
He interrupted the flow of drugs. He had to pay. When he put attention on those protected drug routes running from Nicaragua, protected by the Contras, they had to change their drug routes.
Look what they did to the 2 kids on the train tracks.
Yeah, in Arkansas?
Yeah, they killed them. I mean, the mother, if you go watch the interview, ladies and gentlemen, you got to see this. I forget the name of the movie. I'll try to find it.
Boys on the Tracks, I believe.
That might be it. If you just Google it, you'll find it. These kids' mother, to this day, will tell you that Clinton was running drugs and that her kid was killed and his friend was killed because of what they witnessed. And it was the state police that did it. Because they were running the drugs for these dirtbags. And this is the same scumbaggery that's going on today. It's scumbaggery 2.0 with a twist. Little smile. Hey, I'm your friend. Ugh, disgusting. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break. Holland and I will be back in 3 minutes. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. And, the conversation just continued during the break, so we have a few other avenues to travel down later in the broadcast. But I want to get Holland's thoughts and finish wrapping this up, and then we're going to get into exactly how they control even the police in certain areas and stuff. It's amazing how it all dovetails, especially when you research it and you sit and take the time. And look, I will never stop learning. I don't think that just because I know this stuff now doesn't mean I won't learn something new tomorrow.
We haven't waken up. We are waking. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a little more awake than you are. That's all.
We are human beings, and we're never going to be perfect. I'm not preaching damnation. What I'm saying is we always fall short of the ideal, but that's no reason not to try for it. And those who are the closest to the ideal are our heroes.
Exactly. So we need to not get, is this, I don't want anybody to have a negative attitude because of all the stuff that's been going on lately. We'll get through this. We just got to dissect it and point out what's BS and what's not so that you can help wake up your sleeping, family and your friends, because I don't think that there's a lot of people pumping out the economic collapse. It's going to be this October. And everything says that it's going to be this October, and maybe it could be. Man, I don't think so.
How many times have we heard that?
Well, what? It's 2012 election year too.
Man, if you would have told, yeah, exactly, it's not going to happen before the election. That throws everything into disarray. Likewise, there's not going to be any major disturbances with Israel or anything. They're playing their bets. They're going to keep it stable.
Yeah, they'll wait. If anything, it'll be the new year when something big happens.
Well, that's why I think Obama is the appointed one to be reelected, because he's been running for reelection the past 4 years. So he couldn't afford to be too radical. But still, look at the stuff he was trying and some of the stuff he got accomplished. Okay, think when he's a lame duck for 4 years with a Democratic Congress. Now, I'm not saying left versus right. I'm just talking about the current party in power. both parties have evil agendas that they want to implement, and they're basically on the same side anyway. We're talking about the Democratic Party agenda right now because that's who's in power with Congress and the presidency, and the things they will try to get done. Everything's ramping up. It's getting more intense. Think about Clinton's second term if it had not been marred by the Monica Lewinsky scandal.
And will we have something like that? Will someone come out and admit that all of a sudden you hear all this talk that Obama's he's bisexual and he's
they've already killed a couple of people like that, haven't they?
A couple of people from the bathhouses in Chicago. Yeah,
exactly, and in his choir and anyways,
Larry Sinclair's the only guy that didn't die, and I think they've tried to kill him, but I think that they have to back off to a certain extent because he's
after they try a couple times and then it happens, obviously it's a hit, and they can't be too obvious about it. Yeah, Larry Sinclair is the only real public name associated with that scandal.
And he did what do you call it? A press conference on C-SPAN a couple years back.
Yeah. So, that would just be. But then again, man, I thought they were pushing their luck when they killed the DC Madam. I was like, really?
Yeah, I was going to say this.
Really?
But you know what, dude? They were probably freaking out because if she got into the court, they knew she was going to open her mouth, and they can't even have it on record because they could. Yeah, people say, well, Popeye, they could go back and erase the records. Yeah, they can erase the records, but then they'd have to kill everybody in the courtroom, including the judge, the bailiffs, their families, everybody. You know how much? I'm not saying they wouldn't go to
one court statement from that lawyer naming names would never have gone away.
Oh yeah, dude. People would have gone. There would have been some serious hell to pay even if they didn't get prosecuted. Things would have been very sticky at the very least.
Is that because she fought it? Did she plead guilty or not guilty?
What
if did she try to play ball?
I think she was playing ball with the prosecution because she said that she was going to name names. They were going after her, and she said I'm gonna name names and open my mouth, and that's
probably because she was being sacrificed anyway, and she knew she wasn't getting any help from above. So,
well, yeah, she probably saw that she was being screwed over and said, "Well, screw this, I'm going to name names." But I'll give Alex credit. He warned her, and I'm sure the guys over at Coast to Coast did too when they had her on.
And Alex got her public statement that she would not commit suicide.
Yeah, and she
like what 2 days later or something like that.
Yeah, but I think a week later they found her hanging down. It was down here in Florida. They found her in their mom's backyard or whatever, hanging.
In her shed in her back. She had just paid off. She had just paid rent on 6 months of her condo in D.C., I believe, because she was only expecting to do a couple months in Club Fed. She wasn't going to Leavenworth or anything or Supermax. She was going to a minimum security prison for women. She wasn't a violent offender at all or a repeat offender. So it was going to be, a vacation. She had paid rent on her condominium. She was in a pleasant mood. She went down to her mom's trailer in Florida to drop off her possessions before she reported to jail. Then where she wasn't being hauled away in chains. She was going to show up at the front gate with a tote bag, and then she goes into the shed in the back to put some boxes in there. And then she doesn't come out for a while. The mom goes out there and she's hanging from the rafters. And one thing, I forget who brought it up, but a woman, she was a madam, but she wasn't like a pimp. She ran a high quality escort. So I'm not defending it. I'm saying my point is she was a very classy lady. And if you know anything about suicides in females, the tendency almost overwhelmingly is for women to try to kill themselves to where they look the best, especially
like pills or something
in the bathtub. They do their makeup like when men commit suicide, they're slobs, they're filthy, they got food on them, they don't care, they're trying to whatever. When women, they'll put on makeup, they'll put on their best clothes and all that. They want to leave a good-looking corpse. And so for this woman to hang herself in the rafter in the back of this trailer park, after declaring that she would not commit suicide and she had nothing to commit suicide over, obviously it's a hit, but that indicates how desperate they were.
Yeah, and whoever did it probably cased the place out a day or two before, figured out how they were going to get her, and just waited for her.
The full resources of the state were pointed directly at this woman. Frankly, she had no chance.
Yeah, she was done. She should have opened her mouth ahead of time. I'm telling you, if she had opened her mouth, it doesn't matter whose radio show it was on. It could be, Geraldo Rivera, Fox News, CNN, doesn't matter. If she had opened her mouth before she got to that courtroom, she would have been much safer. Because if she had opened her mouth and, a couple 100,000 people or even 1 million people saw it, and then the next day she suddenly dies in a car accident, anything that she mentioned and anybody she talked about is now going to be scrutinized. instantaneously. And anything she said will be pretty much in the court of public opinion, whether or not she could be lying her ass off. Doesn't matter. In the court of public opinion, it'll be taken as gospel because now she's dead. And obviously, that looks shady. And that goes back to, like you said, they only try to kill people a couple of times. And if they don't succeed, they got to back off for a while.
Yeah, because it's much, much too obvious.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe
and
10 years later they'll get them.
And there are people like Judith Mary Meyer, what's her name? Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oh, yeah, Judith Baker.
Judith Baker, I'm sorry. They've tried to kill her several times, but they've, and she is just as dangerous as the DC man was, but she's been able to stay alive all of these decades and despite several attempts on her life. So I guess it never is hopeless. You just have to play your cards right.
Yeah, and look at the Kennedy assassination. Look how many people died there, within 5 years, witnesses. And then, extrapolate that to, well, does the modern day government do shady things like that? Of course. Let's go back to the 90s again. Look up all the people that died at the hands of the Clintons.
Yes, hundreds of people back when he was governor that started popping off. And now I can relate this story, and this is secondhand from the doctor who treated Clinton, is that Clinton was a heavy drug user, very heavy drug user. That's confirmed by his physician.
Yeah, big-time cokehead.
Yes.
Yep, and Papa Bush, too, by the way. He was a big-time drug addict, too.
Yeah, he was more the pill popper type, the lithium and the amphetamines. That's the old school drugs.
Yeah, as opposed to the newer school stuff, the younger stuff. And look, his son was a big cokehead.
Yep. And, it's funny, I used to run a business in Texas where it was a dry county. And so to drink a beer, you had to actually, enlist yourself in this social club. And then all you do is ran your driver's license through the scanner. That's all it was. A modern day technology answer to an outdated concept, I guess, whatever. But, and the demonstrator was showing us how to use the software. And he says, watch this. And he typed in George W. Bush's Social Security, actually his Texas driver's license number, and this is when he was President Bush Jr. And it came up as 7 zeros and I believe like an 8 or a 9. That was his driver's license number. And they actually had the age. Actually, what it was the Texas driver's license numbers were entered in almost sequential order. So anyone who was in the no numbers, just one digit, they were all 90, 100 years old. They were all dead. All of them, because I went through 1 through 9 and checked them all. They were all born in 1910 and 1913. Somehow George W. Bush had this fake fake ID is basically what it was. That's not the driver's license number he was issued when he first got his driver's license. So, they cleaned his record at some point, and that was probably a coke bust. They just cleaned his whole record
He
out.
was a big-time putz when he was a kid, and I'm sure that
he still was.
He's still a putz now. You look at him now that he's I don't like to resort to ad hominem attacks, and I won't. I shouldn't. But look at him. When you look at him now, he goes. What pisses me off when I see him bicycling with the wounded warriors and stuff, and these guys are hugging him, and they're like, "I love this president. He loves the troops so much, dude." As a vet. I got to tell you, I don't. Well, you understand the fire that builds inside of me. Okay, I just want to smack this man across his mouth. Not even beat him up, just bitch slap him across the mouth, and spit in his face, and tell him in front of the whole world and all the vets and their families, how dare you? How dare you stand here and act like you're these people's friend when you sent them to die and fight and kill based on BS and lies, all for money, power, and some, 2,000-year-old agenda that you morons are trying to follow.
Spectacles like that just leave me speechless. I'm literally numb with lack of understanding and frustration at that. It's disheartening to see that. But even when things happen that show the real reality, they manipulate it. For example, I believe it was Senator Gary Webb a couple years ago when Bush was president. I don't think he's in office anymore. He's the author of Born Fighting, and he's a Vietnam veteran. He was a Marine Infantry Rifle Company commander in Vietnam, and a scholar, former Secretary of the Navy under Reagan. real right-wing kind of guy, but he's a Southern Democrat, but he's real conservative, kind of paleo-conservative. And Bush came up to him after some speech he gave before Congress and tried to shake his hand because Senator Webb's son was in Iraq as a Marine officer, and Bush came up to like shake his hand and ask about his boy, and Gary Webb basically slapped his hand away and said he wouldn't be there if you hadn't sent them. Told him that to his face on the floor of Congress and walked away.
Nice.
Now, this is a Marine vet telling off this draft-dodging piece of crap president. And you know how the media spend it? You know how they spend it was this disrespectful Democrat. How dare he dishonor the president on the floor of Congress? He must be some kind of lefty.
Of course, because he's a nutbag. And if it was the left-wing president, it would have been a right-wing extremist, or racist. It's disgusting. And I'm glad that the guy did it. I support people like that, man. I myself am not a combat veteran, but I have friends who are. I have very close friends that are gone, okay? And I have a problem with the fact that they didn't die. They didn't die with honor, okay? They were murdered. Plain and simple. They were murdered. They were sent
to a country that had never attacked us, had nothing to do with 9/11. In fact, was its government under Saddam Hussein was antagonistic towards Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. They did not like widespread radicalism in their country because it made everything unstable. It was a very secular society. Of course, Saddam Hussein was a bastard. Of course, and he tortured and murdered, so did his sons. But we put him there. In 1968, when Saddam Hussein launched the coup that took over Iraq, he was on the CIA payroll. That is documented. That is actually not even disputed. That's in the history books. We put him in there. We propped him up and asked him to invade Iran after the Iranian Revolution.
We let him invade Kuwait.
We had exactly.
The ambassador was there, and he said, "Hey, we're going to invade." He told her, "We're going to invade Kuwait." Whoever is one of his people said, "We're going to invade Kuwait," and she said, she talked to to Bush.
April Gillespie. She said,
"That's her, April Gillespie.
Our government has no interest in your border conflict."
Yeah, exactly. Her exact words, because that's what she was told.
And what the border conflict was with their Kuwaitis were slant drilling under Iraqi soil, and Iraq told them to knock it off. That was the border dispute. Because
how would we react if Mexico, if we told Mexico not to do something?
We ordered Kuwait to do that. That's why, to start the war.
It's called poking the tiger,
Otherwise, the ambassador never would have said, we have no position. If Kuwait had been doing that of our own accord, and obviously it's going to lead to war, and we were actually concerned about that, we would have told Kuwait to knock it off. It's a proxy. We protected Kuwait's ships in the Persian Gulf. They were flagged with U.S. flags.
But we're supposed to believe that our government is so ineffective and inefficient that they wouldn't have thought of this, Holland.
Yeah, Kuwait wasn't a backwater with some inexperienced political appointee. That was a major ambassadorial post. And they knew exactly what they were dealing with and what the real game book was, not the fake one.
It's called chess, or actually Stratego is more like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a big Stratego board, dude. These people are the people at the very top that pull the strings and play everyone like fiddles. There's no limit to their evil. I used to be surprised
because there's no accountability. They get away with it.
But yet they don't care. And corruption begets corruption. Case in point, the microcosm of this bigger problem of federal government tyranny. Did you see the video of the guy? He was open carrying legally, and the cops were busting his balls.
How about the kid, the 18-year-old kid?
I think that's the one where they said to him something to the effect of, "When the president starts obeying the Constitution, I will." Oh, that's nice.
What was the response? He said something like, "Well, we're not following the Constitution," or something like that.
Yeah, he said to him. The kid said to him something about the Constitution. You should follow it, and their response was, "Well, we'll follow it when the president does. When the president starts following the Constitution, I will," I think was the exact quote, something to that effect. So, it's a microcosm of this larger problem, dude. When you have the federal government running around, the people that are supposedly afraid of the feds coming and straightening them out are going, well, look what they're doing. screw this. I'm going to do what I want to do.
That's exactly that is how corruption works. When corruption is allowed to fester, it infects the host. And when the people on the lower rung of the ladder look up, they may have started out as idealistic young recruits there to serve law and order. But then they get enlisted in this paramilitary organization and they must follow orders, and they see with their own eyes that everything is corrupt. Why would they care anymore? Of course they're going to be corrupt.
Well, look what happened in New Orleans after Katrina. They had cops from all over different agencies coming in, and there's plenty of reports, not 1, 2, 3, 50, 100 or more of these reports coming out from different people that witnessed it, that were attacked, whatever. Mm-hmm. Women were getting raped by police.
Mm-hmm. But, yeah, they've covered up the death count. Yeah.
Oh, dude. All the dead bodies.
There were bodies in the streets.
Oh, my God.
Laying in the streets, been shot down. My own cousin is he's part of a Christian. He was part of a Christian ministry group back during Katrina, and he went down there immediately to set up a soup kitchen. And he's not a radical kind of guy at all. Just whatever. He's going to school and he's in academics, and he doesn't really think outside the box. Great kid, but he's just a normal kind of guy. And he would have no reason to make up anything. And he said, and he told us that he was working down there and he would see helicopters flying over and dudes in the helicopter shooting into the streets like Vietnam. And he said, man, those people weren't looting. They were grabbing food from the supermarket that was flooded. That was happening every day. Just they were going Full Metal Jacket over New Orleans. There were bodies in the streets everywhere.
Yep, and it wasn't. I can tell you, it was probably either private contractors or special ops. One of the two.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they keep it quiet.
The 82nd Airborne went in, so obviously Special Forces did, and there are military intelligence groups with Special Forces personnel stationed all over the country, and they actively engage in covert surveillance, espionage in this country to protect military interests. They surveil citizens, they map out cities for rapid takeover from a military force. They do all of this stuff. In fact, there was a military intelligence group, some Special Forces guys who were involved in the assassination of JFK. Of Martin Luther King. In 1968. Yep. That's proven in Act of State by William F. Pepper. He interviews one of the Army snipers who was the backup shooter. He said, and this is a guy who was the shooter, he had MLK in his sights and watched him go down, get shot by a party he didn't know, which he assumed was another team of his. That it's all need to know. And the military intelligence group's own commanding officer admitted his men were involved in the assassination of Martin Luther King.
It came out in a civil trial. The King family went to James Earl Ray's funeral. They said, "We know that you weren't involved. It was the FBI, the CIA, and Army intelligence."
He was the patsy, and he escaped. He left as soon as he heard the shots. He figured something was going.
How does some dumb redneck get out of the country and disappear for the time that he did, and then get back into the country? Where'd he get all this money from if he was just some, racist moron?
Barely been out of the state in his life. He had never flown. He's a very simple kind of guy, not a very high IQ. That's why they picked him as a patsy. They didn't think he'd be able to figure anything out.
Again, the playbook.
Then after that, somehow he's zipping all over the world, meeting with Raoul, and it's just obviously.
Oh, of course, dude. And I think that the whole where King got shot. I've studied RFK's assassination, JFK's assassination, and King's assassination. And I'm actually working on getting Pepper on right now. Not this minute, you know what I mean. I'm working right now. I'm working on getting him on the show.
Hook me up when that happens.
Yeah, I'll send him your way too, dude. Because he needs to be on as many radio shows as possible.
Yeah, he proved in court. Yeah.
Yeah, this guy, he knows about.
And now he's Sir Hans attorney.
He's what?
He's now Sir Hans attorney.
Oh, yes, that's true. He's involved with, that's where I was going. He's involved with the RFK assassination, and he is Sir Hans' attorney. And amazingly, they're saying they've brought up the mind control aspect into the media, and that's getting laughed at and played down. But another witness came out recently and said, yes, there was a second shooter. So, see, We're not crazy. All right, Holland, we got the break. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com, and hanging out with me tonight and going over the craziness is my good friend and brother from another mother, Holland Vandennieuwenhof. And Holland, I think we've thrown a ton of information out there tonight, and it's amazing how everything that we've talked about, every little thing dovetails into one another, whether it's something from 50 years ago or 5 minutes ago. It's all connected. So it's not
the thread of life. It's all connected.
Yes.
All the way from the top all the way to the bottom in some manner.
Yeah, like what is it? What they call 6 degrees of separation?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. Well, looking back at these shootings now, and you know me, I don't like to rush into judgment on this stuff. I even say it on air all the time. I like to give it a few days, and I always tell people to pay attention to the local news first, because that's usually where the big nuggets of truth come out.
Mm-hmm.
From Oklahoma City all the way up to these 2 shootings. Both of them right off the bat. Let's look at the Aurora, Colorado one first. Witnesses came out, said there was, more than one person in there. They started having different stories. Some guy got up and opened the door, blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden, the judge put a lockdown on people talking
gag
to the
order.
press. Yeah,
gag order on information.
Nobody could get out, nothing. But they could have cameras in the courtroom. So come Monday, out they roll the patsy. He comes in, and you could visibly see this guy is drugged out of his gourd, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people start making comments, wow, this guy looks like he's drugged. So the mainstream media tries to do damage control by coming out, by trying to perpetrate the myth that the guy was doing it on purpose to be disrespectful and to try to throw people off. Because the guy was acting, right? If you saw the video, he wasn't acting. This guy was drugged out of his mind. And what happens in response to that criticism? Another gag order, this time no cameras in the courtroom. So now the only narrative you're going to get from that story is going to be the quote-unquote official narrative. Just like conveniently the underwear bomber, Abdul Muttalib.
Like the Tucson shooting, Jared Lee Loughner just...
the same thing. Both
pleaded guilty.
Pleaded guilty. The Abdul Muttalib pleaded guilty. Loughner pleaded guilty. I guarantee you this guy will eventually plead guilty.
Or he'll be found insane.
Yep, and the other dude, well, you don't have to worry about him, right? Because he shot himself in the head. And conveniently, this dovetails back to same playbook, right? 1997, North Hollywood shootout. The 2 shooters who, again, quote unquote, connected to the Montana militia who gave them their body armor, gave them their guns, and financed them. Okay,
but most of these gangs that were robbing banks to finance the so-called movement were FBI fronts.
Exactly, because if you go to a militia meeting and there's 10 people there, 8 of them are feds. So, and they all know each other. So it's
sometimes they don't know each other, and they're reporting on each other.
Oh, that's true. Sometimes they don't know which one is
informants. Like Andy Strasmeyer in the Oklahoma City bombing, there were an ATF informant, Carol Howe, was reporting on this FBI informant because he was stirring up the community of Elohim City and talking about revolution and bombing buildings and assassinating public officials. So you literally had an informant informing on an informant, an agent provocateur.
And, it's funny that you mentioned Elohim City because they're connected to the SPLC. And when you look into the SPLC, who was the first people to come out and start opening their mouth after the Sikh shooting?
SPLC, which serves on the advisory board of the Department of Homeland Security, which was hip deep in the Oklahoma City bombing. They knew who McVeigh was before the bombing. Andy Strasmeyer was also one of their assets. He was providing information to the SPLC, which was giving it to the FBI, and that's proven through FBI teletypes by Louis Freeh, the director, directing his agents to investigate this information provided by SPLC asset Andy Strasmeyer, who had a background in West German Army intelligence.
And he actually, you got to go watch A Noble Lie because that gets brought up. And I have to give you a quick plug for the film because it's important. If people don't know who he is, you got to go watch the film because they cover it really well. And then you guys even, you found out impromptu while you were talking to one of the witnesses on Alex Jones's show one day that she ended up spotting Strasmeyer's car when the guys were there, the workers with the gray sticks of butter, as she called them.
Well, perhaps I shouldn't be bragging about this because it's a testament to my failure as an investigator, honestly. Because I've interviewed Jane Graham, who's also interviewed in the movie. I've interviewed her half a dozen
I don't think it's a failure, Holland, because...
And I never thought to ask her...
Yeah, but you know what? Honestly, dude, I don't think it's a failure because there's so much information. Sometimes things get missed, but obviously it didn't get missed. It came out, and when she said it again... You picked it up the second time as soon as she said it, so it's not a big deal. I don't think it was a miss. I think actually it was a direct hit because right there on air, on a pretty large radio program, you were able to show, bam, another puzzle piece right into the puzzle. So another connection where Strauss-Meyer is connected to a witness who saw his car there.
In the parking garage with two other men who looked military in appearance. They were very well built and had flat top haircuts. They were putting gray putty on the pillars in the parking garage and stringing wire between them. Jane Graham was a civilian, but she's also a first class witness. She was vice president of the Federal Employees Union. She had already testified before Congress on labor issues, and she'd been in that building for almost its entire lifespan. She knew everyone in the building, and she was being an inquisitive older lady, and she's wondering why this crew was parked in reserve parking, and she noticed what they were doing, putting this gray putty up everywhere and stringing wire. Well, obviously, only afterthought dictates that was plastic explosive, and that's confirmed by a lot of other evidence we have in the Noble Eye. Of course, you can check it out at nobleeye.com. And she actually picked out Andy Strauss-Meyer out of the police lineup as one of the men she saw, taking orders from someone in charge, planting C4 plastic explosive in the Murrah building the Friday, I believe, before the bombing, which was on a Wednesday. So she picked him out, and the car that was there, where the plans for the building that they were looking at were laid out on the hood of. Strauss-Meyer had been pulled over in that same car. That's why I know what kind of car he drives. He got pulled over in eastern Oklahoma near Elohim City. The car was impounded because Andy Strauss-Meyer was an illegal alien, a German national who had overstayed his visa, and but somehow he wasn't deported. And when this tow truck company in some small town on the east side of Oklahoma started getting calls from the governor's office, calls from the State Department, calls from an unnamed Air Force colonel in Virginia, calls from Fort Bragg, telling him to release the car. He said it was the weirdest thing he'd ever experienced in his life. It was just this beat up wreck of a car. It was like a panel station wagon, buys like a $500 car. And so obviously Strauss-Meyer was an informant. He was protected, and we have eyewitness account, as documented in a Noble Lie, of Strauss-Meyer with a military team planting explosives in the basement of the Murrah building.
And I suggest that people go watch the film and pick up a copy. Holland, throw out really quick where they can get a copy of the movie because they need to see it. Nobleeye.com
is where you can buy it. You can watch the trailer. I believe we're selling them for $14.95 now. And a lot of people, some people have criticized us for selling the movie. And I apologize, but cameras cost money, airplane tickets cost money.
Well, considering you're doing another movie right now, you do need
editor cost money, and we just have to make money on these and to continue. We're actually embarking on just a couple of days next week on an 11-city tour, actually a 9-city tour in 11 days, interviewing witnesses and experts for our next movie. Our current movie, which we're working on, should be released in October or early November, and it's called State of Mind, The Psychology of Control. It's a treatment of mind control, not just on the individual MK Ultra level, on the societal level, how society is manipulated to fulfill these agendas. Corporate control of mind control, and back through history to its birth, its modern birth, when science was able to catch up with the dreams and ambitions of the ruling elite in the late 1800s. The arts of psychology and chemistry and biology were applied towards controlling people. It started off in Germany and England, and it came to America. And it birthed many of our problems today, and that's what we're dealing with. And in a State of Mind, we're going to be exposing all of that in a watchable manner so people really know what the true game afoot is.
And that's important because I don't think people have any idea of the. Well, I mean, the people that like listen to, my program or someone else's broadcasts or whatever, they might have an idea. But I mean, without doing the research yourself, I couldn't do the subject justice in a 12-hour live broadcast if I wanted to. I really couldn't. I just wouldn't be able to cover from point A to Z everything that's there. You have to go research it. If you want to get into it and you're not sure and you're kind of a newbie to it, okay, until Holland's movie comes out, because I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure once I see it, I'll, if it's anything, put together anything like A Noble Eye was, I'm sure it'll be powerful. So, and I know Holland, he's not an idiot. He's actually a very well-researched writer and filmmaker and radio show host. So he knows his stuff. That's why I bring him on here, because I can sit and talk to him and say, the conversation obviously flows very fluidly back and forth between the two of us because he understands the level of things. But until his movie comes out, I would suggest if you want to understand the level of things, there is no easy way to break you into mind control. So I'm going to recommend 2 books that I always recommend to the listeners. The Transformation of America by Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips, and Thanks for the Memories by Bryce Taylor. Okay, those are 2 good starting points to understand. So you go back and I
would recommend the books of Jim Keith.
Go ahead, give them out. If you know any of the, do you know the titles and stuff?
Mass Control is one. Mass Control, I believe, was his one of his last books, and the other one I believe is called Mind Control, World Control. And
what about don't the Huxleys? Don't they have some books? I mean, if you could sit down and take in some hardcore stuff, you could actually read what they think and what they plan.
Yeah, Aldous Huxley is an excellent example of that. He wrote, of course, Brave New World, which is a warning of the world that was coming to be, that's coming to fruition right now. Society kept in a drug state of mild euphoria to keep them compliant with what's going on.
Isn't it interesting that they had Soma in there? And what do we have? What do we have now as one of the most addictive drugs in the world?
Oh yeah, exactly. It's horrible. And Aldous Huxley also wrote The Doors of Perception, which was the public's introduction to LSD, telling them about the wonders and good effects of LSD. What is not mentioned in the mainstream, and actually that's where the Doors, the band, got their name from, this book by Aldous Huxley, who, by the way, is related and connected to the Fabian, the round table groups in England, the elite controllers in England on the progressive side.
Well, and that dovetails with the Tavistock Institute and all the mind control over there. His
brother ran UNESCO. So he was not just connected by family. He had firsthand knowledge of what the plans were and what they were doing. So what's not mentioned is that while he was writing Doors of Perception, introducing LSD to the market in America, he was also working, collaborating at least, and this is confirmed by CIA documents, with the CIA's MKUltra program, distributing LSD to intellectuals, academics in this nation. And basically the CIA started the LSD craze as a vast experiment of what a mass hallucinogen would do to America. I mean, even Timothy Leary admitted that he was distributing LSD at the behest of the CIA. He admitted that more than once. He justified it in his own mind, and I'm not saying that, he was nefarious. A lot of these people were perhaps really thinking they were, trying to wake people up to the true reality, and maybe they thought they were playing the CIA. I don't know. But they were working with the CIA, and they started the LSD craze.
Yeah, through universities. That's who they first went after. I mean, this is all part of the quote-unquote MKUltra experiments. That's why I tell people, when you hear MKUltra, a lot of people always think, some crazy conspiracy theory about mind control, blah, people aren't remotely controlling your brain, tinfoil hat guy. Well, MKUltra is an umbrella term to cover a vast array of different experiments, which they are still conducting to this very day, right on the general public, through television, through things like billboards that beam sound around your head so that you hear. Case in point, I've played the audio on air of that. There's a show called Paranormal State on A&E, and there's a billboard. I forget what city it was in, but you can look it up on YouTube. There's a billboard where it beams it at a certain angle. When you're walking down a certain portion of the sidewalk, you hear whispering in your ears, and it's like, "Hey, who's there? Is that real? What's that?" And it's coming from this billboard. Now, if they can do that with a billboard, I mean, do you think that's just an advertising company doing that? No, that's an experiment.
Yes, and also that technology filtered down through several levels to reach there. It's been used on higher levels for decades, probably. I mean, Jose Delgado back in the early 1970s got into a bull ring and actually was able to control the movements of a raging bull and turn him docile, make him go left and right with a joystick on a remote control he held in his hand. That was in the early 70s. Afterwards, he went to Congress to get funds for further research in this matter, which he received. And he went to work for the Navy, and all of his research and findings went dark after that. We have no idea what Delgado worked on in the late 70s and the 80s and in the 90s, what he developed. Funded by the Navy, funded by Congress. Jose Delgado, who wrote Psycho-Civilization of History, where he advocated that the vast majority of human beings should have an implant in their head to control their moods, keep them compliant, while a technocratic elite ruled the world. That he wrote that in plain view, and then he later goes to work for the Navy in black research. So, and that was in the 70s. So of course this technology has progressed and evolved. The methodology has been honed. They've learned their mistakes, and they've gotten so much better. What is out there and what is at play is much greater than any of us can even fathom. I think there's a quote, I forget who said it, that most people are persecuted beyond their wildest dreams.
And people have no idea the level of manipulation that goes on every day. I mean, once you wake up, and again, I'm not woken up, I'm waking, you know, and when I can't even I can't listen to anything mainstream anymore. My wife can't stand it because if we're in the car and I have the AM radio on and the local neocon is talking, I'm ripping into him. You liar! And she's like,
I can't listen to him. I'll lose it.
Yeah, she's like, you can't turn the radio, because I get mad. So she's like, you can't listen to the radio anymore. She doesn't want me to listen to. She's like, and it's done out of love because she doesn't want me to, you know, stroke out or have a heart attack probably. But I mean, I get pissed. Because they just spew so many lies, and it's the same crap over and over and over again. And, you know, ladies and gentlemen, what Holland and I are talking about tonight, especially with the mind control aspect, this stuff is not fake, okay? This stuff goes back to the late 1800s in Germany, and we exported a lot of this over here. I mean, we were already looking into it, but we brought a lot of, at the end of World War II, we brought a lot of the scientists that the Nazis had, whether they had them willingly or they were being held as captives,
or whether they were war criminals or not. Criminals or not.
Some of them were ardent Nazis, you know, and they had killed or were responsible for the death of thousands of different people. Didn't matter.
Wernher von Braun, who basically put us on the moon in the upfront space program, he was in the Waffen-SS. He was overseeing the labor camp that was launching the V-1, V-2 rockets towards England. He was overseeing that. They estimate 20,000 concentration camp people died in that harsh labor camp there under his direct supervision.
Yep, and how many more died because of American bombs too?
Exactly.
Hear about.
Exactly.
And they just inflate numbers and say, see, this is what pisses me off about World War II. They've made the conversation about concentration camps and stuff so muddied and such an...
You know who invented the concentration camps? The British in the Boer War in 1898. They invented the term and the concept and the execution of concentration camps.
Gee, big surprise.
The British Empire, when they took all the Boers and took their families out of their homes and put them in these camps, and they were dying of disease and starvation, and that's how they subdued the Boers in Boer, South Africa. That's the only way they could do it, because they couldn't fight them off. Those guys were picking them off from 2,000 meters with their Mauser rifles. They had no chance. They had to take their families physically, put them in concentration camps to subdue South Africa.
And see, again, so this is not a conspiracy theory, it's conspiracy fact. It's two or more people doing something bad, okay? And when you look at the issue of World War II with the camps, a lot of the times you find that, I think, and this is my observation on it, knowing what I know now about all the secret research that they were doing, and that Auschwitz, they say, oh, so many people died at Auschwitz, blah, 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 blah. They were just killing them and gassing them. And I think that what they were doing, I think that a lot of that is fabricated. Not saying people didn't die, but I think a lot of that is fabricated purposely to cover up the fact that Buna plant, it was like synthetic rubber that was next to Auschwitz. I've seen enough evidence that wasn't really a Buna plant, that they were working on atomic weapons. And that's what a lot of the slave labor was being used for. The SS was running all these black operations centers, even into the Ukraine, and they had underground bases and stuff where they were building secret weapons and working on all sorts of technology. And they had an unlimited source of labor. They had all these people in these camps, and that's what they did with it. And I think a lot of these stories are certain things, facts or whatever, I think are blown out of proportion or twisted to A, muddy it, B, make it so that nobody wants to go near it because it's too taboo, and C, cover up a lot of the secret weapons work that they were doing. I mean, there's enough evidence I've seen from between Robert Wilcox's, just reading 3 authors, Robert Wilcox, Jim Mars, and Joseph Farrell. Just the 3 of them with all their resources, and then going and researching all the stuff that it's utterly amazing. We're
not saying that the people didn't die. They're covering the method of death.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
They were actually in the work camps on these secret programs, and they took that technology and they're trying to cover up that.
Yeah, they're twisting the way that they died. They
died. They were murdered, but most of them were worked to death.
Yep. And a lot of them, like the scientists and stuff that knew what was going on when the Russians were when the Russians were coming back in through the Ukraine and everything, they got slaughtered by the SS because they didn't want anything to be known. They didn't want anything to get into the Russians' hands. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break. Stay tuned. More when we come back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Final segment, tonight's episode, Down the Rabbit Hole. And I urge you to check the YouTube archive. I will make sure that as soon as I get the archives from Jimmy X, I will render them and get it up ASAP, because Holland and I are going to be doing overdrive off air at the end of the show, because we're just not going to have enough time. So what we're going to do is we're going to record a bit of an after show, and within the next few days I will I'll put in a little overtime and I'll get it up on YouTube. That way everybody can check it out, and then I'll make sure I put it out on Facebook and Twitter. So make sure you check out FedJack on Facebook, and make sure you follow me on Twitter at FederalJack, and keep an eye on the archive page at federaljack.com, and I'll have it up within the next few days. If I could somehow get it to broadcast live, I would, but unfortunately we can't, so it's not a big deal. We're just going to record it, and it'll be up in the archive. So anyway, Holland, during the break we were going over the serial killer aspect of all this, and it's, again, if you've done a lot of research, and I know you have, but like the listeners, once you start doing a lot of research, you realize how this all dovetails. And again, I've been doing this for a long time. There are people that have been doing it much longer than myself. Holland's been doing this a long time. It takes years. Christopher Everard and I talked about this, and it's I'll never stop learning, and every day is a new experience. But it takes years to be able to understand the game to the point that we're at right now. And when you look at it as a hobby, for a long time I studied serial killers, just because I found the aspect of a human being doing the things that they do and hunting other humans like prey. I found it that it didn't weird me out, and I wasn't attracted to it, but at the same time,
it's very interesting.
Yes, I wanted to understand it. You know what I mean?
And to understand it, because it's such a horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah, I think that's the only way to describe it. Even weird isn't a good way. I think horrible is a better way to describe it. And, the way I deal with things like that is I don't run from them in fear. I try to understand them and understand how things work, so that if there's a way I can, get rid of a problem like that, okay. Or if there's something that society is doing that's creating that, then that needs to be addressed as well. And when you research it, man, how many of these guys, Holland, are attached to these mind control projects? And when you research it, you find out, like you said, half of these guys, if not all of them, most of them, or actually, or all of them, end up being ex-army guys. And it's like pattern that they're pumping out serial killers.
A disturbing portion of the modern-day serial killers have been in the military and the Army in particular. In fact, Dave McGowan, who wrote Program to Kill, which, by the way, is an excellent book, excellent introduction, an excellent overview and examination of military and CIA involvement in creating mass murderers and serial killers, and all of these experiments that have produced all of these men. A lot of them have the same MO, especially in the 80s. There's about a 10-year period in the 80s when about half a dozen serial killers had the same history. They'd all enlisted in the Army. They all had gone to the same basic training in San Antonio and attended the same medical school in San Antonio. And then they were shipped to Germany, which, of course, is a common enough occurrence for an Army career. But when all of these serial killers have the exact same one, it calls into question what actually is going on. And then what happens after they get to Germany is that they get kicked out. And then a couple of years later, they're slaughtering people. And when you look closer, what Dave McGowan did so well in Program to Kill was really looking at these cases and seeing that it wasn't just police incompetence in some times why they couldn't catch these guys. It was what could only be explained as malfeasance, deliberately not catching some of these guys. And when you study some of these other cases by other authors, this is not so shocking. When you look at the Franklin cover-up by Nick Bryant, and how police organizations were involved in child trafficking, child sexual abuse. You understand that this happens. This is documented. And they were programming the nation, literally, not just programming these killers. Look at Son of Sam in New York City, I believe in the late 1970s, early 80s, when Son of Sam, the supposed lone nut, was going around with a .44 special and shooting couples making out in cars all over the city and supposedly women with blonde hair. But he had other accomplices. That was established. The cops knew it. He talked about them.
Remember he said he talked to a hole in the wall and his neighbor's dog and everything talked to him. Well, if you research the guy, the neighbor, the dog told him what to do, you find out that he's got some connections that are shady. And this guy's got connections. It's almost like he was his handler and that the only thing he could remember was the dog. The dog was the buffer, the plausible deniability, as it were.
Exactly. And Son of Sam, Sam Berkowitz, he talked about that. He was a killer for the cult. One of many. He was taunting the police at some point, saying, my brothers are going to come and get you. And the evidence of the shootings, Berkowitz had solid alibis for some of those shootings, which had the exact same MO, .44 special against a female blonde or in a car. And so obviously that was a Son of Sam murder, but the only convicted perpetrator, Berkowitz, was not verified at those locations during that time. So there were other shooters. They were programming New York City, studying it. There were probably hundreds of CIA psychologists, psychiatrists, Tavistock shrinks in New York City during that summer, taking notes, measurements, compiling data.
You look at it, dude, when you look at what the public is told, the official story, the myth, whatever, and it's never anything like the reality of the situation. They always leave out minute details that are somewhat important. And again, this is not done by accident.
Well, much of it is reported. I mean, that's where most of these sources come from for this anomalous information, on par, of course, with the Oklahoma City bombing. I mean,
when I say reported, I should say
it's just not packaged for mass consumption.
That's what I meant. It's not prepackaged and fed to the public.
After the 2-week news cycle is over, it's packaged for reference, and all of those anomalous facts are left out of that package.
Yeah, and where do they end up on? The cutting room floor, and they disappear into the memory hole, and never again are they found. That's why you got to pay attention to the local news right off the bat. Again, this goes right back to Aurora, Colorado. You remember we were talking about the mind control experience?
It goes back to Wisconsin, the 6 shooting. They're saying 4 shooters. The people on the ground who saw them minutes after the shooting, they're being interviewed by local cameras outside the shooting, and more than one said a 4-man team dressed in black. How do you mistake that for one lone crazy redneck? How do you do that? How do you mistake that from several different witnesses?
Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you know this, but apparently the Sikh Indian temple is a victim of the same camera company that apparently supplied the cameras to the Pentagon and supplied the cameras to the tunnel and throughout.
No kidding, because all of those temples, of course, Muslim mosques and a lot of temples, they have security cameras. In fact, that same temple, Sikh temple, had been vandalized. I believe, just a couple of years earlier, that someone attempted arson. So they had security cameras.
Well, I got to give credit where credit is due. This YouTuber, her name is Sheila Aliens. It's the YouTube name she goes by. She pointed it out that at least that's the video that I saw. Somebody had sent to me, and she pointed out that there was this NPR audio of this woman making a statement, whatever, that they admit that they admitted it right there, that the cameras, and this is not her making it up and twisting the facts. That NPR was saying, yeah, the cameras in the Sikh temple didn't work. I mean, come on, people. How come there's no camera footage outside of the Gabrielle Gifford shooting? You've never seen the shooting, the video of the shooting. You've never seen that footage. No. There was over 200 different videos. They've even admitted it.
It was the parking lot of a strip mall. Every store across from right in the parking lot of a large grocery store. There are cameras everywhere.
Not to mention all the news cameras, cell phones, personal cameras.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing.
The speed control cameras on traffic lights across the street. All these different cameras that, they can spot you driving down the road, and if, you're wanted.
If I rob a liquor store tonight, that will be on the news tomorrow.
Your mug will be right on the news, dude. But, if it involves the Sikh temple and a mass shooting or one of these events.
Or Congresswoman.
Yeah, what video footage? The cameras, they weren't on. Are you kidding me? Like, hello, people. Let me tell you something. When there's a meme that keeps getting repeated over and over and over again, this is not crazy talk. This is called pattern recognition. Okay? And didn't Napolitano tell us to see something and say something? So I'm seeing something. I'm seeing a pattern, and I'm saying something. They're doing this.
Exactly. And it goes back to Oklahoma City. I mean, that's the kind 7/7. They said all the cameras on the bus weren't working. With Oklahoma City, of course, there were dozens of security cameras in the downtown Oklahoma City area, around the Murrah building. It was a federal building in downtown Oklahoma City. There were cameras everywhere. In fact, in A Noble Lie, we interview the man, Charlie Rose, who was actually contracted by the FBI to make hundreds. He said at least 400 tapes, copies of tapes that they had collected. He said for almost 3 weeks straight, 8 hours a day, him and his assistant, they were making copies. They weren't allowed to see them because there was two gun-toting FBI agents who wheeled the tapes in every morning and wheeled them out at the end of the day and watched every move they made so they would not watch the tapes. And none of those, of course, most of them are going to have nothing. But they have never released the videotape surrounding the Murrah building showing if, as every person who saw McVeigh says, and in court was demonstrated, that McVeigh was not alone in that Ryder truck, despite what the government says, and that the truck was not the sole cause of destruction to the Murrah building. It was coming down, according to 14 witnesses inside the building, it was coming down before the truck bomb went off outside and blew in the glass. Confirmed by the seismograph, 2 energetic events, 10 seconds apart, and they will not release the videotapes. And when you see that time and time again, that's the first sign that the fix is in, something's up.
That's a huge red flag, and it's over and over and over again, dude, every time. And you could file Freedom of Information Acts, and they'll tell you it's locked down for, in the case of the Aurora shooting, it's the integrity of the investigation, I think is how they put it. I mean, come on, the integrity in the investigation. Really? Nobody can know what happened? You can play it on TV and scare the crap out of everybody. Or
I got to watch just about every week. I got to watch planes crashing into the Twin Towers and killing 3,000 people. So how come they can't show this?
It's just, dude, it's right in your face. I mean, they're not even trying anymore, Holland. At least the old school guys. This new crew, this younger generation, I think some people say they're lazy, but I don't think it's that. I think it's that they're so smug that they're depending on the apathy of the American people. And I think part of that smugness they have, when people go, how dare they? Well, we're kind of responsible for that because they piss in our mouths, in our faces, and all over us, our family members. And
we have been manipulated, societally chemically into subservience. I mean, we're not the end result of millions of years or whatever you believe of evolution. We have been degraded.
Of course, no, we
our
are
environment, through our society, through public
chemically
school,
retarded is the best way to put it. Between vaccines and the crap
fluoride.
the fluoride, and then all the mind control they use, the propaganda you're taught. I mean, from the time you go into the school system, they mold your brain and turn you in. They try to turn you into their little robot. And if you don't fit into the box, that's when you're a troubled kid or anything else. So I mean, the level of it, it's very deep, but they're I think, at least from my point of view, their smugness is because they look at that and they go, stupid sheep. See,
and they gain power through our apathy.
Exactly.
Silence is consent, and the more outrageous they get, like when they killed the DC Madam. I mean, no news anchor on the mainstream news could have been reporting that and not exactly knowing, even if they had no inside information. They're saying with a straight face that she committed suicide. They know she was murdered. Everyone knows that. But
you ever wonder how these people look at themselves at night? For real. Like if I look at myself and I say, I live a very humble life. I don't have a lot of money, but I can look at myself in the mirror, bro, and say, you know what? I may not own many physical things, but I know that I'm proud of what I've done, and I know that at least I can sleep at night knowing that I do the right thing. I don't know how these scumbags sleep at night. Probably a lot of Ambien.
Well, a lot of disassociation. I mean, this is not a new, this is not a new development at all. Look at Nazi Germany, the banality of evil. Adolf Eichmann, who ran the administration of the concentration camps, he wasn't shooting or gassing people. He was just, signing his name to memos, deporting thousands of Jews every day and gypsies and other politically inconvenient people to the concentration camps, shipping them to work camps, to day labor camps, to camps to be killed. But he was actually in person kind of a nice guy. This was, he was actually studied during the Nuremberg trials, and a book was written about him called The Banality of Evil. And he was kind of a nice guy, pillar of the community, good to his kids, had cool dogs, he was nice to his dogs. But he went to work every day and signed the paper knowing exactly what he was doing, killing thousands of people. It's part of the human condition, and it's exploited time and time again to control us and to keep their minions, keep the gears of the machine rolling along.
Yep. And again, another part of that exploitation is doing psychological operations such as the Aurora shooting, such as the Sikh shooting, such as as far as I'm concerned, the Gabrielle Gifford shooting was a psyop, and it was also a hit on the judge because, he was the obvious victim. And
who had his security pulled the week before, usually had U.S. Marshals accompanying him, especially to public events. Look at the public event itself. You got a federal judge and a congresswoman, and there's no security, there's no cops standing around. Every time a politician does anything in this day and age, there's always at least a cop there.
How many times do you see people, there's always the guy, whether it's uniform or even
I go to the book fair. I go to the book fair, and there's cops walking around.
Dude, I go to the Publix, which is the food stores here in Florida, and there's cops doing their special duty thing, where they're the paid security guard at the front. It's the same thing with the Aurora shooting. Okay, case in point. Again, the Aurora, Colorado Police Department is part of this little group that fed the intelligence to the Fusion Center, the ITACG, right? They're part of this group that feeds the intelligence 2 months before that says, hey, there's going to be theater shootings. And then 2 months later, the very shooting that they warned about, including grenades, right?
And then they pull the memo. They pull it off.
Exactly. The memo disappears. Thankfully, people got it before it disappeared.
But here's the thing: if they weren't, why were they afraid? Why did they pull the memo? They should have been taking credit for having known this was going to happen.
Well, because it points out a glaring red flag.
Exactly.
They put it out 2 months ahead of time, and when you go, it says underneath it, in partnership with the ITACG. Well, I don't hear a lot of people talking about this. Maybe they don't realize this. A couple of people that work with me at Federal Jack, I got it and I threw it to them and I said, do me a favor, I don't have time, see if this thing is real or not. And they ripped through it and they got back to me like a day and a half later and they gave me this little nugget, and then I looked into it and they were correct. The ITACG is this group of law enforcement agencies that they share intelligence.
IA, what does that stand for? Is that International Association?
To be honest with you, I don't remember. It says the full name on the thing. If you just Google the ITACG, and it'll come up. It's an actual government website that it's off of. And when you look under the roster, there's like 15 people on the roster, and one of the very people on the front page, and it's not like there's a huge amount of like 60 or 70 different groups. There's not that many. Like I said, maybe 15, 20 at the most. And right at the front, right in the very top row, I believe it was, it was either the first or second row, is the Aurora, Colorado Police Department. So they were part of this group that fed the info to the Fusion Center, and they put out that roll call release. So then 2 months later, the very shooting that they warned about happens at a theater right up the street from the police station, and there's not a freaking cop on duty at all at a midnight opening of a huge movie where there's 4 theaters with 300 people per theater, 1,200 people, and not one cop.
Where policy was, and it had been the week before with all their showings, that there's always a cop there with a gun.
But that's not a red flag.
Exactly. Security was pulled out. Cameras don't work. No trial.
That guy, by the way, was connected to mind control stuff. He was some part of some DARPA experiments and some research.
Infusing reality and fantasy. He talked about it himself in that ABC footage. His own presentation, he talked about working on a project under an NIH grant. This is his freshman year in college. He'd been one of 6 people in the nation out of thousands picked for this National Institute of Health Neuroscience, the study of the mind, controlling the mind. And he was giving a presentation on temporal illusions, fusing fantasy and reality. And the same guy breaks out and is the Joker shooting up a movie theater. So obviously he became a victim to his own experiment. They turned it on him.
And again, you could see it in his face when they brought him out. You could totally see the guy was...
He's drugged out of his gourd.
Yeah, and I guarantee you, my wife, I talked about this. She told me about this because she had researched, she has an interest in the crime end of it, the serial killer end of it. And she had researched a lot of times what they use to subdue these people with. And I forget what they call it in Spanish, but it's something like the trifecta or something like that. And it's 3 different drugs. And one of them, I think it was Haldol, Adderall, and then they give them Benadryl in case they have an allergic reaction to one of the 2. And I mean, Benadryl itself, some people will, it'll put you on your rear end. So, and you mix the other 2, you're going to be like, I mean, look at that kid's face and tell me again, you think that he was out there, I'm going to be the Joker. He doesn't know where he is.
He was asking his guards why he was in jail. He had no idea. And
Sirhan doesn't remember the assassination of, Bobby Kennedy. Again, why, does anybody see the pattern recognition? I know Holland does. It's like him and I are sitting having beers going, yup, sitting up on a ridge looking at this from a faraway point of view going, psyop. They're doing it.
What's the hardest to believe part about this is that it's so obvious. It's not that hard to uncover. I mean, the shooter, the patsy or whoever, the one guy who was shot in the Sikh shooting, he worked in Army psychological operations. Are you kidding me? You're really trying to pull that over on us.
Yeah, and he doesn't know the difference between a Sikh Indian and a
exactly,
quote unquote Muslim. Come on,
the Sikhs and the Muslims are historical enemies. Their religions are not related at all. They have actually killed each other in wars in this century, within the last 2 decades. They are frankly antagonistic towards one another. They have nothing to do with Islam. And so you're telling me a guy who, I mean, despite his racist whatever BS, seemed rather coherent and able to, fairly intelligent in his theology at least, could not figure out the difference between the Sikhs and the Muslims? Come on.
It's horse crap. Holland, we are out of time, brother. Real quick, we got about 15 seconds. I want you to plug your site and everything you got. Your Twitter, go.
NobleLie.com. Check out the movie, buy the movie. I'm also co-host on I'm actually a host on Free Mind Report, Monday night, 6 to 8 p.m. Logos Radio Network, freemindreport.com, NobleLie.com. Thank you for having me on, Popeye.
Anytime, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the promised after show that I had mentioned.
The after party.
Yes, the after party here to tonight's edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. And as always, when Holland's on, there's just, there's so much information flowing back and forth. 2 hours isn't enough time. And I can't, just rip down other shows and continue to broadcast live. So, as usual, we're going to record an after show for the archives. Holland, there's so much stuff that we were covering, and there's more to it. We kind of covered, I guess it's like an iceberg on each subject that we covered. We covered just the tip, but I really want people to, or I urge people, it doesn't matter what I want, I urge people to dig deeper into each subject. And one of those things is the serial killer aspect of this whole thing, the mind control. Or let's look at the mind control aspect, and we'll look at each part a little bit more. The one of the big things is the serial killer aspect of it. Again, when we were talking about the mass control of society, think about it. You only need one serial killer, right, to go out and scare how many thousands of people for how many years? Mm-hmm. You could literally keep entire cities in your control and in your grip. Now, when you research these people, like we said, a lot of them come out to be, you look into their past and they have really shady pasts. They ex-army or Marines as once in a while, but it's always the same motif, and a lot of the times they're they're almost like they're targeted individuals, because people always say, well, I never thought, so and so would have done this or done that. They knew him growing up.
Look at the BKT killer, I believe, the bind, kill, torture killer out of Kansas. He had pretty much the same MO for most of his career. I guess he would, kidnap women and tie them up and take pictures of them while they're terrified and do horrible things to him and kill him. He did this, I guess, over the course of a couple of decades till he was caught just a couple of years ago. But that was most of his victims. But the first killing attributed to him is very interesting. It was in the early 80s, and the victim was an Air Force sergeant who lived in Nebraska outside Offutt Air Force Base. And he was actually not just an Air Force sergeant. He was involved in special operations. This is confirmed. It's not doubted at all. He was involved in special operations. He was described as a martial arts expert, and he was always disappearing for months at a time, and then coming back out of the blue. So obviously he was engaging in covert missions. And he was a martial arts expert. His family was trained in martial arts, the wife and the children. There were guns all over the house. And they had a couple of well-trained attack dogs, security dogs, Dobermans, if I remember. And supposedly, the BTK killer broke in and by himself killed the entire family before any of them could defend. And it was not like in the middle of the night. It was while they were all awake. And before anyone could get to a gun, somehow he defeated the attack dogs, killed all of them. And that was supposed to be his first kill. And then all of a sudden, for the rest of his career, with over a dozen women at least, he just reverted back to this other MO. But this guy, this Air Force sergeant, was likely a target of some kind. And obviously there was a team involved in the slaying of this man and his entire family. So, of course, and if his connections, if someone can look into it, the BTK killer's connections to any kind of military intelligence operations, that needs to be looked into. But the MO changed all of a sudden. The first target was probably this Air Force sergeant who knew just a little too much, or was going to blow the whistle.
Killers don't usually do that. They usually graduate, and maybe the MO advances a little bit.
Yeah, it's totally reversed. Usually you would start off with individual victims, and then to start off with a whole family of well-trained people.
And you wouldn't do it in the middle of, awake time.
Yes, it was in the evening. So, yeah, obviously that was a hit involving a team that they attributed to the BTK killer. He may have been part of the team, not ruling that out, but obviously that was a hit.
Yeah, and it was obviously a team that went in there. And the same thing that happened to the one congresswoman, a former congresswoman, I can't remember her name, a couple years ago. She was going to come out with the abuse about kids and child trafficking and for the white slave trade and all that stuff, and the abuse of children with CPS and everything else. And then suddenly she gets killed by her husband. And then I think he shot himself or whatever.
Exactly. Or perhaps during the 2008 presidential campaign, when the first birther, Bill Clinton, started basically bitching to the Democratic Party that they were electing an illegal alien, or not an illegal alien, but someone who was not qualified because of his citizenship to the presidency. He started bringing it up and talking to people in the Democratic Party hierarchy about that because he wanted his wife Hillary to be president. And frankly, I thought she was the anointed one. Obama came out of nowhere. And a couple days after Clinton started throwing a fit about that, I'm not saying he was trying to do a good thing or right thing. He was trying to, help his wife out, to whom he owed a lot, by the way. And a couple days later, someone walks into the Democratic Party headquarters in Little Rock, Arkansas, and blows away with a handgun one of the Clintons' longest friends. For over decades, they had known this man. I forget his name. And after that, Clinton shut up about the birther issue.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Exactly. Some dude just walks in off the street, blows away this dude behind a desk, surrenders. And after that, Clinton started playing ball.
Well, it kind of makes you wonder what happened to, what's his name? The guy that was Vince Foster. Because I don't know what, you look into it. I think that obviously Clinton or somebody up in that food chain, whatever, had him killed because of the way Hillary acted when, she raided his office. But, if you go back to the 90s again, it dovetails back into the Clinton administration again. It's like the same people, same MO. And look how many people died then. All their security guards. A couple of the ATF agents that died at Waco were their former security guards for the Clintons, bodyguards.
Oh, yeah. And that famous footage from Waco where it shows that ATF agent, he's on top of the roof by the ladder, and bullets are flying out of the room, and he's jumping down, and he jumps on the ladder and slides down. Well, they only showed the last half of that clip, and we're to assume that it was Branch Davidians shooting out and trying to strike him. But the full clip shows 3 agents going into that room from the rooftop window, and that agent, who was later shot at, tossing a grenade into that room after those agents went in. They started firing back. Those were agents shooting at agents. That was a hit. Those men were killed. That relates to Oklahoma City. There was a Secret Service agent killed, I believe one of 2. And he had just been transferred from D.C., where he was the Clintons, part of the Clinton security detail. And we got this firsthand from V.Z. Lawton, whom we interview in the movie and who recently passed away just a couple of weeks ago. V.Z. Lawton related it to me and told the story several times. He knew that Secret Service agent because V.Z. had worked in that building for years and years, of course, and he was a very friendly guy. And so he made friends with this Secret Service agent, and he asked him, so tell me, what are the Clintons like? And the Secret Service agent said, he just looked at him and said, they're scum of the earth, scum of the earth. And then that agent was told on the morning of the bombing to be at his desk at 9 a.m. to receive a call. 9:02 a.m., the building exploded. Now, of course, the whole bombing was not just to kill this Secret Service agent, but in these mass events, they often try to wrap up several loose ends. They try to put as many eggs in the basket.
They found John O'Neill dead in a closet in World Trade Center. They found his body slumped up in a closet, in one closet space when they found him. So
one of the few intact bodies found.
Everybody else was vaporized by whatever took the towers down, but they found O'Neill's body. And I'm not saying that O'Neill was part of it. I'm saying somebody probably went in O'Neill's office and said, "Excuse me, John O'Neill," and he was like, "Oh, things are going on." I funk funk with a silencer, threw him in the closet, closed the door, done.
Exactly. And that was his first day of work. John O'Neill, the former head of the FBI's anti-terrorism branch, who had been trying to blow the whistle on the failure, the malfeasance, why he was not allowed to investigate the Saudi links to Al-Qaeda, that they were shut down on the orders of the Bush administration. He was starting to bitch about that, and he was basically kicked out of the agency after a series of BS charges. I mean, they were actually just throwing crap against the wall and seeing what stuck. And he went from being the high-flying, one of the most famous agents in the agency to being forced out. And then his first day of work was in the World Trade Center as a security chief.
Yeah, head of security for the World Trade Center, and he dies. But that's a coincidence.
Exactly.
I'm supposed to believe that that's a complete coincidence. It's amazing that there's certain individuals too that don't they claim to be friends, we'll say, with O'Neill, and you see videos of them being interviewed by We Are Change. I'm talking about Bo Dietl. He says that I was friends with John O'Neill. Maybe he wasn't. I'm sure he probably really is sincere about the fact that he misses his friend and everything. But if you really want to do O'Neill justice, you should be asking questions. You shouldn't be on Fox News, dicking around with IMIS.
Well, I mean, that's not just cowardice. I mean, or going along with it. It just may be simple cowardice. They killed John O'Neill. Why wouldn't they kill someone else?
Well, it's true. I got to give them a little leeway. They might have.
That's the thing with Terry Akey here in Oklahoma City, the police officer who was killed for what he was going to blow the whistle on, according to the bombing. This was relayed to me by Don Browning, another police officer who responded on the scene. We interviewed him in the movie. He said he was so surprised about these men in the police department whom he would trust with his life would not back him up on what they both knew. They all knew to be true. That was contrary to the official story. He said he was so surprised. Don Browning had been in Vietnam as a Marine. He fought as a machine gunner. He was a police officer for many years, seen a lot of stuff, been through a lot of stuff with these guys, and how few of them, a few did, but how few of them would come forward with what they knew to be true. And guys he knew would have his back in a second in a firefight. And so there's a difference between physical bravery and moral bravery, and having one does not necessarily at all mean you have the other. I mean, you see that a lot of in the military. You'll have guys, Marines, soldiers who will run through enemy fire to rescue their buddy, will charge up a hill without hesitation, but will not buck their superiors, will not cause waves, will not face the censure of their peers. Those are two types of bravery.
Well, you bring up Terry Akey, and there's a really good point that we didn't get a chance to get into on air, and I'm glad you brought it up because it reminded me of this. You were talking about how they were able to control, the feds were able to control the cover-up of his murder. And it stemmed from a conversation when I said, we were talking about the drug corridors, and I said, there's different police departments. You see the stadies where, or the sheriffs in a certain area, and they say, if we catch you with a certain amount of, big amount of money or anything in this area or drugs, we're going to confiscate it. And I said to you, I wonder what would happen if one of these sheriffs ended up pulling over somebody that
a CIA protected shipment.
Yeah, it was like a CIA protected shipment, and you brought up the fact that that's actually kind of how they held the cops at bay when Terrence Akey was killed.
That's how they control departments. I mean, the CIA is smuggling all of this coke in, and at least a fair number of it has to be being pulled over on highways across this nation by local PDs, by state troopers, and so forth. Well, that's CIA coke. So what do you do now? Well, it's just like think of it as the mafia. You accidentally rip off the mafia, guess what? You owe them a favor or they come down on you. Exactly. That's how they control departments. And then when they find these departments that are engaging in drug smuggling, now they have the goods. And that's what happened to Terry Akey. What was developed by reporters and journalists on the scene was that the reason the Oklahoma City Police Department did not investigate and protest the murder of one of their own was that the local FBI has the goods on the Oklahoma City Vice Squad, which even in the 90s had a horrible reputation. They had suffered several scandals, and we all knew it was much worse than what was being talked about in the papers. And I have actually firsthand witness of the behavior of the Vice Squad in that time period, and they were running drugs, all kinds of stuff. And the FBI had the goods on them. You will back off from Terry Akey, or we will destroy the department. They were owned.
Yeah, and they didn't want to be destroyed and have the department go down, because I'm sure the feds, if they went after the feds would have gone after them.
You're only trusted if you have dirt on you.
Look at what happened with Arpaio. Arpaio is a perfect example. I'm not saying, by the way, that Joe Arpaio is a saint. I don't agree with
not at all.
Yeah.
He's a doofus, but the sun shines on a dog's anus every now and then.
Exactly. And you know what? As soon as he starts to bring up any type,
he was the federal government's butt boy.
Oh, when Bush was in, yeah, they loved him. Him and his pink underwear army over there.
But Arpaio has always been kind of dim-witted and doesn't really know how the game is played. That goes back to his days in the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. He was known as someone like that. And he got on the wrong issue. He got on the wrong side of the birth certificate issue, and now the feds are suing him. Well, they should have sued him about 30 years ago when people were dying in his jails, as they continue to do every day. It's a horrible system he's running there in that county, Maricopa County. And now, all of a sudden, out of the blue, after he turns on this issue, after the birth certificate, now they're suing him over his abuses in the jails.
Yeah, and you see, of course, it's done because he brings up certain things to light, brings up certain issues,
and that birth certificate is so easily disproven as authentic.
That whole thing's a red herring, I think, and the whole issue of who his real daddy is, I even think, is a red herring. I interviewed Wayne Madsen about it right after his new book came out, and I had him on, and I asked him about that, and I said, "What do you I said, to me, this whole thing about the birth certificate issue is a red herring to cover up the CIA creation that is Obama." Yeah,
that's the thing. I think there is. Yeah, there is definitely something to the birth certificate. It is fake, obviously, but the real scandal is not that he's a Kenyan immigrant. The real scandal is that he is a CIA creation. In fact, I'm halfway convinced that he's probably the first MK baby. Who is now president. His mom was working for, all these intelligence-connected organizations throughout her entire life, traveling to all these politically sensitive parts of the globe at politically sensitive times for U.S. aid agencies. That's obviously a CIA cover. And and she gives birth to this guy, this Obama, who has all of this missing time, who spends time in Pakistan, in the in the 70s, when there was a lot of CIA involvement in there, and still is to this day, and no one can remember him from college, and there's almost no photos of him from his early days. I'm halfway convinced he's the first MK baby installed as president.
That's an interesting concept, and I do think he was, at the very least, he's a Manchurian candidate, to be controlled and used, yes, totally, if not something worse. But you can totally tell that he's. People say, "Oh, And
it's almost laughable. We have elected the man president of the United States, the leader of the free world, yada yada yada." And
I don't know about elected, but yeah,
whatever, appointed. He may have won that election just because people were upset with Bush, but whatever.
No, very true. No, it's a good point. It is you can't discount that. You're right.
Yeah, but his story is so easily disproven. His official autobiography is a joke. It makes no sense, and it has no congruence with reality. I guess Joseph Farah just came out with those photos of Obama wearing a wedding ring when he was had a Pakistani roommate, a wedding ring, and some of these are official photos. And we also know that most of the dirt that's come to the surface on Obama is that he is gay. Not that I care. But apparently he's in this beard marriage, and he's president of the United States, obviously, whatever. It's a lie. He's living a lie, and it's so easily proven a lie. And somehow this man has such a ridiculous backstory that has no backup at all, he gets elected president of the United States. It's just amazing.
And nobody questions it. He comes out of left field, dude, and nobody questions it. Nobody says
the birth certificate, the Photoshop wasn't even that great. And of course, they kill Osama bin Laden when the results come out. Everything is it's laughable.
But what really gets me is why would they release something that's so obviously fake? And a lot of people said this. Why would they do that? But I don't think anybody really focused on why. And that's why I think
they got away with it.
I think the whole thing's a red herring. I think that they did that because I think they left it so people would sit there because they knew people will sit, especially the quote unquote conspiracy theorists, right? They knew that there's a large segment of the population that'll focus on that, and that'll keep them, if they leave it open-ended like that, it's like
that's like the double bind counter argument to conspiracy research. It's like, well, they wouldn't be so obvious, so obviously it's not what it seems.
Well, that too, and that people are so going to be so invested in that they're not looking at the fact that he's a CIA creation, because it's more plausible to some people that maybe he was an illegal alien, because that plays into a lot of people's racist beliefs or people's ignorant beliefs, even if it's not racism, if it's just plain ignorance.
Arpaio's not coming at this birth certificate thing from a like truther.
Oh no, he's not a knight in shining armor like people would have you believe.
He's coming from a very right-wing authoritarian point of view, and that's what a lot of people involved in the birther issue are into that stuff. And those are the same people, just waiting for the race war to break out, which might be contrived to divide and conquer us.
Yep, and Arpaio again, dude, he's not a saint, and I don't like. It's like if I know something bad about someone and someone says, "Yeah, but they have a view on this," I don't care. I don't sleep with the enemy. I don't care if they're my friend at some point or not. I know there's the old saying, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend," but I still
temporarily.
I don't trust Arpaio.
With reservations. No.
And sometimes I wonder if they allow that to be perpetrated because they have dirt on him. So maybe he's been told. I guarantee you by now his life has been threatened at least once. Mm-hmm. He may not talk about it because that might give some credibility to his enemies, or he wouldn't want them for whatever reason. He wouldn't want to let it known. But I'm sure he's gotten threatened at least once. And I'm not talking about just what they've done to him with the whole federal the feds going after him. I mean, look what he did they raided the county offices and stuff. Mm-hmm. Remember, a couple years ago, Arpaio raided his own county's offices, and it was all this. I forget exactly what the reasoning was, but there was internal arguments, and he just acts like a dictator. I have no respect for him whatsoever. That's a perfect way to put it. And I think a lot of that is blown out of proportion. I don't think that they want you to know that he could be very well be what you called an MK baby. Controlled, raised and birthed and raised specifically for this purpose.
Well, maybe not for this purpose, but definitely he came into position.
Or a purpose, like a political purpose.
Yeah.
Not to be, not the president. You know what I mean? To be used. And
maybe he was on the short list when he was born. I don't know.
Well, you know what, dude? it would probably be more something along the likes of like Bill Clinton. His real last name isn't Clinton. It's Rockefeller, and it's the same thing. They sleep with the chambermaids, whoever, whatever you want to call them, servants, whatever the term of the day is, and then they don't want them to be known about the bloodline or anything. But then these very same people become.
Well, it also screws up the inheritance.
Well, that too, but they are well taken care of, and they to a certain extent, more than any of us ever would be.
And they value their bloodline, so these actually it serves their purpose. They maybe do it on purpose because they're using their own bloodline to put those people in powerful positions while they are behind the scenes on advertising the fact that they're pulling the string. So maybe it's a long proved methodology. They were doing it back when Hitler was born. So obviously they're doing it now.
Exactly. And so you have, there's proof that Hitler was a Rothschild. There's more than enough proof to prove that Clinton is a Rockefeller. And again, the Rockefellers are just an arm of the Rothschild banking family / industry. All these things, all these people are actually inbred in with each other so much that that's why they end up having disease and stuff. These people that they put themselves up there like they're elites. They posture like they're the next step in evolution, yet they have some severe issues themselves, So again, maybe that's another reason why, to preserve the bloodline, maybe that's why they go outside the family once in a while. I've talked to Christopher Everard about this, and he says that's exactly why they do it. Sometimes they need some fresh DNA into the mix because it's getting a little too close, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly. I mean, and they saw what happened when the royal families of Europe stayed exclusively within their tight circle of relatives, and eventually they started turning into drooling imbeciles. So, they value DNA from the outside to rejuvenate their own entire DNA.
And they're really into this. Again, that's where the whole project...
It's eugenics, man. They were studying this in the 1800s.
Exactly. Margaret Sanger and Bill... Dude, you know how many people have no idea that Mr. Windows himself, and that whole thing is debatable, but Mr. Microsoft will say, Bill himself there, his father was in charge over at Planned Parenthood, and his father is a complete and utter eugenicist. I mean, his father loved Margaret Sanger, right? Not, you know what I mean, not was in love with her, but he loved her ideas, loved the way she thought. They were all on the same page.
And now Bill Gates is distributing millions of vaccines across the globe out of the goodness of his heart.
Yeah, no, that's not eugenics. No. And notice where they go, too, right?
Africa.
Exactly. And what do eugenicists think about black people? They think that they're scum and vermin.
They do.
Well, I think Sanger called them rats or something like that to that effect, or vermin.
And they have to keep Africa down because it is so minerally rich. There is no reason in the world for there to be poverty in Africa. The most valuable minerals in the world are harvested out of that continent. I mean, the Congo produces, like 87% of the mineral that's needed to coltan to power almost every single electronic device in the world. And for some reason, they've been fighting some confusing civil war for the past decade where sides keep on changing and no one even knows why they're all killing each other. The reasons change from week to week. I mean, I've tried to look into the civil war in the Congo, and it makes no sense. But they're just being paid off.
Ebola conveniently breaks out so that
they're being paid off to keep themselves divided and conquered and down, while the international corporations just rape them of these minerals.
Yeah, look up the De Beers family, and they're all related, blood lineage to these black nobility families. This all goes back to the royal family.
Cecil Rhodes, who started the Round Table groups to control the nations, the English-speaking nations of the world.
He's buried in Africa. A lot of people bash David Icke, but he looked into where he's buried. And
that's where he got rich. That's where he got rich, getting diamonds out of South Africa.
Yeah, well, you know how they believe that there's, they communicate with whatever other worldly forces, whatever the hell they are. If they're aliens or lizard people, or if afraid these people believe Satan, whatever it is, they have this other authority that these sick bastards, they beg and they honor and they, oh, we love you. And Cecil Rhodes, apparently, now this is according to this shaman down there, Zulu shaman, but apparently he's buried where he's buried. He chose that spot because this is apparently where some of these the entities from whatever they are, they have I guess that's where they make their appearance or whatever up at the top of this mountain, and on this path where people have seen them, we'll say, he wanted to be buried at the and that's where he's buried, on this path. And then of course that's a little weird in itself. Whether or not it's true, it just goes to show you that the people that have founded things like the Rhodes Scholarship, everybody, the Rhodes Scholarship is so great. Well, the guy who left all of his money to found that believed that lizard people from another dimension were controlling things, and he wanted to be buried on the pathway that they walked by. Okay? Mm-hmm. So whether or not it's real is up for debate. The point is, this is what this guy believed.
Yeah, the point is that these are the rich, powerful men running the world, and what they believe, to a large extent, becomes reality, at least in its effects upon us who are underneath in this hierarchy. So even if it's true or not, to some extent, what they believe becomes reality because they are so powerful.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter whether or not they're completely insane. I mean, it does, but it doesn't matter if you believe what they, you could say, oh, I don't believe in that crap, I don't, okay, well, that's fine. I'm not asking you to believe in it. But what I'm saying, like Holland said, these people believe in it. So it's important to understand what these psychos believe, because you can't, it makes it easier, I'll say, to understand the level of things that they'll do. Because then, once you understand, if you're looking at it like they're on the same page as we are, then when you look at things, you're like, man, how could they kill people on 9/11? How could they stage a mass shooting and just let somebody go in there and kill innocent people? Why would they do that? Well, because they benefit from it, and they're literally psychotic. They don't think like you and me. They're Malthusian. They read the philosophies of people like Thomas Malthus, who, the end justifies the means. It doesn't matter if you got to kill 1,000 people to get your political, you have a political agenda. It has to, you want your political agenda to move it forward. Well, if you got to kill 1,000 people to do so, so be it. It's the way it's got to be. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You break a few eggs when you make an omelet. Any good cook will tell you that. How many times have I heard people say that?
Exactly.
It's disgusting.
I mean, if you're born into the elite, frankly, you almost got to feel sorry for those born into the elite because they have no choice. They're going to be raised by their parents and by their schoolmasters to be elite psychopaths. they're going to be trained. I mean, it's not like they can back out and, fight against the New World Order. They'll be killed. I mean, I think there's at least 2 Rothschilds in the past 20 years have suddenly committed suicide in the same hotel in Paris for no apparent reason. Maybe these boys weren't playing ball. I don't know. But they really have no choice. They're blooded. They learned from being removed from society, from the real reality of society. You can go soft. You can lose touch with reality. So they're blooded. They're exposed to ritual killing to make them cold-blooded. They are turned into psychopaths because only psychopaths can wield power under this corrupt system.
And, a lot of times when you look back through history, a great movie to add to your collection, if you ever get a chance to watch it, is Illuminati 3, Murdered by the Monarchs by Christopher Everard, because he does movies in sequential series. So he'll do an Illuminati series, and there'll be 4 or 5 different parts, and each of them is like 2.5, 3 hours long. Well, part 3, it talks about the monarchies, these black nobility families going back a couple hundred years at least. And you see how they murder their own, on a regular basis, their own family. The sons will murder the fathers so they can come into power. And they
just watch HBO, the Medicis or whatever. It's on cable.
Oh, there you go. I don't have cable, but there you go.
Well, I've heard about it. Look at the history of the Medicis. I assume that's what this show is covering. But they slaughtered each other left and right, and they were the elite of their day. I mean, one of the Medicis became a pope. He bought his way in. Or the Borgias. Look at them. This is how they work. Those were the elite power classes, power groups of the day. We can look at them now objectively because it's several hundred years removed from that time.
Yeah, hindsight's 2020.
But in a couple hundred years, perhaps the entertainment in this world will be showing what the elites of this day are doing, manipulating society, killing off thousands, killing each other when they get out of hand or out of control. This is nothing new, and to think that this stuff happened in the past and is not happening now, that's a conspiracy theory that rich people in this day and age of mass communication and instant communication and everything being connected, it's a conspiracy to think that rich people are banding together to control world events. What are you retarded? It's always happened, always will. Now it's easier. They have the science to execute their will even more. That's why we are reaching a paradigm shift, because science, even the science that we know, but think of the science that we have no idea about, the divergent technology streams that have been in place since at least the end of World War II, when they recovered Nazi technology. Think of the science that is in place right now and the power concentrated in the hands of banks, institutions, corporations. It's easier now to run the world than it ever has been. Before then, communication was spotty. It wasn't fast. And now they can do it all. Why wouldn't it happen? There's nothing to say it's not, and everything to say that it is, and even worse. But basically the dichotomy to that is that we are learning now what is going on. Back in the old days when the Medicis and the Borgias were running the world, the known world, the Western world, the people on the bottom had no idea. They had no clue even who these people were. Now we know in this day and age, because of the information revolution, we're using the technology and the science ourselves, the science that's made available to us, that is, and we're catching up. So that's why this battle is really reaching crescendo between the elite power groups and the common people who are awake to what's going on.
And, Brzezinski talked about this, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago now, at a CFR meeting where he said, 100 years ago, it was far easier to control 1 million people than kill 1 million people. Mm-hmm. And now, because of technology, society is evolving at a rate that they can't control, and it's getting out of their hands. And basically he said, now it's easier to kill 1 million people than it is for us to control them. Mm-hmm. Because now, there's just too many ways for people to find the truth out. And that's why they have to bring back, more war. They have to bring back the police state. They have to have troops being willing to go in and kill and shoot and kill civilians and round people up. And, people could say, oh, well, they're gonna do martial law in the next week or two. I'm going to tell you what, I don't care when they do martial law. They could do it now. They could do it 5 years from now. it is not going to go easy for them, and it is not going to be a piece of cake. And I'm going to tell you what, I don't think that it'll turn out on their side, no matter how long they wait. Because they can't wait too long, because then, eventually they'll lose, right? So then
we're in a race. We're in a race to the finish right now. They're worried that we're going to catch up to everything. I mean, you see that it's manifesting itself. The Tea Party served its purpose. The Occupy served its purpose. The new paradigm that we invent to combat this will evolve even further. And they're in a race before we can catch up, or they cement total control, and they're going to have to get nasty and ugly.
Hence, Aurora, Colorado, Wisconsin. And I have a feeling it's just going to continue to get worse. And knowing that
they're already invested in blood. They can't back away. Oh well, we're not going to do another.
Yeah, we give up. I mean,
that would be too much to do for mass shootings. No, they will do anything it takes. Anything it takes.
I'm willing to bet there's going to be more. And I hate to say that, but I'm willing to bet there's actually going to be more events like this until they can get their agenda pushed, or we finally stand up and something's got to give either way, and they're going to keep pushing it. See, if it was left alone to the natural course of events, things like this wouldn't really happen, if at all. Once in a while, maybe in a blue moon, once every 50 years or something, and eventually we would evolve out of it and it wouldn't happen. But these people, no, they're not going to let that. They got to keep adding gasoline to the fire.
Yeah, this is not natural human behavior. This is not things that we need government to solve for us. These things wouldn't exist if there wasn't government intervention in every aspect of our lives and creating these threats to keep us dependent upon the state. That's what these are, invented threats. These would not be around in a natural, organic human society, because they don't exist in natural, organic societies across this globe, never have. But for some reason in this modern society where so much control has been cemented around our lives and our behavior, all of a sudden, all these people are going around slaughtering people, yet they have connections to military intelligence and mind control, whatever. But these things would not be happening if they weren't being invented. This is not the natural course of events, just like you said.
Well, I mean, let's be realistic about it and look at things. I mean, the only time these mass shootings seem to happen, again, 97, the North Hollywood shootout. Everybody says, well, what was going on in 97? They were looking for a reason. Well, if you're going to start militarizing the police to the point that they're at now, because when I was a kid, the cops' biggest weapon was a shotgun. Okay, they didn't have AR-15s and body armor and all this other crap. There was none of that. So what precipitated that? The North Hollywood shootout. After that, every cop across the country had to be outfitted because, people have guns.
Exactly. It might turn into a massive firefight on the streets of your city. So now the cops all carry ARs, and they're not afraid to use them.
Right, because before that, if I had said to you, hey, if I was the police and I said, well, we want to get these guns and body armor, and the general public went, well, what the hell do you need that for? Well, we need tanks and stuff because we could have shootouts and stuff. And you'd be like, dude, you've been watching Heat too many times.
You know that the sheriff of Oklahoma County here, he actually submitted to the city council a request to buy a Harrier jump jet.
What?
For use by the sheriff's department. A fighter bomber. A vertical takeoff and landing fighter bomber. And what
was his justification for needing, a Marine Corps fighter bomber for the sheriff's department?
I don't know. It was rejected, thank God. I wish it had been accepted because they're incredibly expensive, and the upkeep, especially in vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, is horrendous. And it would have just been a huge boondoggle. I mean, you have helicopters. But that was just the mindset. And he's still sheriff. That's the mindset. He wanted a fighter bomber for some reason.
That's insane, dude. I mean, I thought cops wanting drones was insane. That's like taking it to a new level. Excuse me, could you acquire us an Apache? On the off chance we have to take somebody down on the freeway.
Give it 10 years, man. Give it 10 years.
You know what, dude? It doesn't. Nothing surprises me anymore. You want to?
There was an LAV pulling over a car.
I saw that. I was gonna. I wanted to ask you about that. James shared that on Facebook, It was thanks to him that I saw that. James Lane, everybody, that's who I'm referencing.
Producer, director of A Noble Eye.
Yes, a good friend of Holland's. I consider him a friend of mine, and he's just an awesome guy. And if it weren't for him, I wouldn't have seen his picture. But he shared a picture that somebody he knows took a picture of. They actually used a light, I would say a light armored assault vehicle.
Well, that's what LAV stands for, light armored vehicle. And the Marine Corps uses the LAV-25. It's mounted with a 25 millimeter cannon. They're also used to carry missile systems, mortars. It's kind of an all-around weapons system carrier, and it has turrets and all kinds of fancy stuff. And it was painted in camouflage, and it had sirens blaring. It was pulling over a car on the highway. I wish we had gotten some footage of what the markings on that vehicle were. I don't know who was. We need to know what agency was running that LAV, because those things are fast. They can go on the highway because they're actually
like
wheeled.
65 miles an hour. I think it's tough.
Yeah, they're wheeled, not tracked. So they can go on the highway. They're not going to damage the roads, and they have a high rate of speed. That's what they're used for.
Yeah, it's like it's as mobile as a Stryker vehicle. If people are more familiar with the Stryker because of the Iraq War, it's
Stryker was for a large extent based on the LAV actually.
Yeah, and in fact, if you've ever played any Medal whatever the hell it is, Medal of Honor, whatever not Gears of War. Call of Duty, that stupid Xbox and PlayStation war simulation games, they have them in there too. They have the other ones too, the light armored vehicles, the LAVs. They have them in there too, which is kind of creepy because that's like predictive programming, like get used to seeing armored vehicles and stuff on the streets in the video games and the movies, and then now it's in reality.
Well, the Stryker vehicles, we're going to be seeing those on the streets because the Army and the Marine Corps, as the drawdown in troop levels in Iraq went on, they retired all of those Stryker vehicles that they were using in Iraq. A lot of them were moved to Afghanistan, of course, but not all of them. They're being shipped back to this country and kept in storage. They're not being used by the military anymore because they're not seem suitable for armored warfare. Apparently, the Army's still on this Cold War footing foot. So they're basically kept in reserve. They're not being used in units based in the United States. So you have all these Stryker vehicles on standby, not being used. We're going to see those being bought or donated to police departments. We're going to see that very soon. You're
already seeing Bearcats.
Yeah, the Bearcat. Yeah.
Bearcats were made specifically for Iraq. And now you're seeing them come back, and you're seeing Department of Homeland Security getting them. You're seeing police departments getting them. And why do you need a Bearcat? What do you need that for? Well, Popeye, there's terrorism. Really? Where? Where have you seen? The only terrorism I see are the guys in, $10,000 Armani suits up in Washington, D.C. I don't see any terrorists here. And if you're referring to Abdul Muttalib or the other morons that they roll out every couple of weeks that the FBI's trained, they're all patsies, and every one of those cases can be destroyed. Every single one of them. They just broke out. I played this video clip the other day. They broke out the fear porn again, Holland, and it was, oh my God, the newest Al Qaeda training that was taking place over in Spain. Apparently, they busted it up. They were training with paragliders. You know what a paraglider
is? Like James Bond?
Yeah. And I'm like, are you kidding me, dude? Those things are not fast whatsoever. They're loud as hell. You're going to tell me that Al-Qaeda is going to fly them in? And the news guy was like, the woman, it was a guy and a woman, and the woman's like, so where would they put the bombs? And they show this shot from underneath, and he's showing the undercarriage. He goes, well, you could put a large amount of explosives up in this area here, right? And I'm thinking, does anybody know aerodynamics? If you add that kind of weight to that thing, it's not going to take off. It's not going to fly right. You're not going to be. And this guy's like, they could fly these things right in quietly without anybody knowing into
plastic wings.
Dude. And I'm talking about
fabric.
They were showing, the ones they were showing were the ones that look like it's like a go-kart with a big fan on the back, and it's got the parachute.
Yeah, yes, those are actually pretty neat vehicles.
Yeah, but, you could go slow and you could fly around and control yourself. But do you think? I mean, what is this, Bond? He's flying himself into the volcano. You know what I mean? Into the volcano base. Like, come on, man.
It's like during the build-up to the Iraq War, where they were advancing a story that Saddam Hussein was building remote control planes to fly bombs to America. I was like, the range on that is a bit extreme, and the only people flying remote control drones is this country.
Yeah, the only people with technology to fly drones from 4,000 or 5,000 miles away happens to be our country. I don't know of any other country in the world. They might have drone technology, but I don't see the Chinese flying drones over Canada, and drone bombing people. So the only people I know that have that technology is the United States, interestingly enough. When you talk to somebody about perhaps the fact that maybe the hijackers weren't piloting those planes, but maybe they were just, they were.
I've been told by people that it's ridiculous to think that there's no way those planes could be remote controlled. I was like, what are you talking about?
Dude, did you ever see, hello, just go Google or go on YouTube.
Predator.
Look up the old, look up the old footage when they were field testing new types of jet fuels. And they needed to crash planes in order to test the jet fuel, and then also test new types of runways in case of crashes and accidents and stuff like that. Well, how do you think they test that stuff? They remotely fly 767s and things and other types of planes into the ground and crash them. One of them, it's on record. I think it was Boeing that did it. They flew it might have been a 767, or it was either a 737 or a 767, whatever it was. Anyway, they flew the thing for something like 36 or 48 hours or something.
Across the Pacific, across the entire Pacific.
They obviously they probably did some sort of in-flight refueling or whatever, but that's
even more impressive by remote control.
Yeah, and with a civilian aircraft, air refueling. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the only people I know that have that mastered is the Air Force.
Yes, that airliners they land at airports and refuel. They don't in-flight refuel. So obviously the military was doing that, running remote control, running a plane by remote control across the entire Pacific. And somehow it's ridiculous that remote control planes were used at 9/11 just a couple years later.
But yeah, I'm not supposed to believe they could have remotely controlled the planes, but it's okay to believe that a Mars rover is running around via remote control on another planet. But no, remotely controlling a plane from somewhere else in the country and flying it into a building to create terror and use as a.
We could put a remote control spacecraft on Mars. Through communication links that take like over a minute, and somehow it's just implausible that remote control planes could be flown into the Twin Towers.
You say, well, yeah, you're crazy. The government doesn't have that type of technology. They're not that. They're inept. I love that argument. The government's too stupid, dude. Look, they can't run anything. And I'm like, you really believe that, don't you? If I pretend to be stupid, right, and I pretend to be dumb, and you don't know me, and I pretend to be a nincompoop idiot, right? You're going to think that's really how I am, and you're not going to expect too much out of me, right?
Yeah, you're never going to suspect Earl the slow janitor as the guy who masterminded the bank robbery.
Right, but usually that's who it is. Didn't anybody? What was the movie, The Usual Suspects or whatever, with Kevin Spacey? Mm-hmm. And he plays the retarded guy. Yeah. He's all messed up, and at the end of the movie, he walks out and he's limping, and all of a sudden his limp straightens up. Mm-hmm. And they're all like, who's Kaiser Sosa? Who's Kaiser Sosa? He's Kaiser Sosa. They all kept talking about this guy, and he was, he pretended to be all jammed up. And they do that, man. That's how they get away with it. They pretend, oh, I can't even boil water. I'm a moron. I ruin cold cereal. Meanwhile, they're doing like some of the most diabolical crap behind the scenes that you could possibly imagine. Throughout history, dude, it's like that. If you look back at World War II, let's shift gears here a little bit and throw this out there. I know the listeners this will blow their mind a little bit, but I know Holland is no stranger to what I'm about to throw out here. The Nazis, most people don't realize this, and I mentioned this earlier, but the Nazis worked on the atomic bomb, and so did the Japanese. There's more than enough evidence to show that the bombs that we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not American bombs; they were German.
Well, the refined uranium was not.
Nope.
After the surrender of Germany, we got that uranium because we were out. We had tested it up.
And their fuses.
And
a bunch of other stuff too. I forget. I think it was U-234 was the name of the U-boat that they captured. It was a German U-boat, and it was a big one. It was It was a huge U-boat that was transported, it was retrofitted to be a transport sub and transport large quantities of stuff. And on the manifest, the Navy manifest, those casks were missing. The wooden barrels, which would have contained the heavy water needed, were missing. I mean, there was a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff that happened that mainstream history denies, and that's why, again, there's a lot of lies about World War II, and that there has to be this specific myth, and a lot of it. Yeah, and people say, oh well, it's that's when you'll get it's the Jews trying to cover up this or that, and again, that's a red herring argument because that muddies up the water and makes some people just so disgusted they don't even want to talk about the real issue of Zionism or Israel or anything like that, or look into the concentration camp issue because it makes them, ooh, I don't want to look at that. And that's what they want, because when you look into it, you realize that a lot of these camps, again, they were using these people as slave labor to build secret weapons. And the atomic bomb wasn't the end-all be-all. They were working on hydrogen bombs, which use atomic bombs as an igniter, okay, which are even more powerful. And there's more than enough evidence to show that the Nazis actually field tested it on the Russians. They vaporized an entire infantry. I think it was a battalion, like battalion size, just gone. If not even more. Maybe it was a couple of battalions. I have to look back. I don't remember the exact number.
I do recall reading about that some large Soviet formation just vanished from the face of the earth in this massive catastrophe, and no one really knew what happened or was talking about it.
Yeah, even their equipment vaporized. Just gone. And I mean, when you research it, again, you got to go read people like the books written by Joseph Farrell, Jim Mars, and Robert Wilcox on the subject, and then they give more than enough references to go from there and do even further in the research, and you realize that, holy crap, the Nazis were working on atomic bombs, the hydrogen bomb. They had figured out how to enrich uranium at a more efficient rate than we had over here in the United States, or that even the British had. So, when people say, oh, the Nazis, they didn't have the technology, they built some crappy centrifuges and stuff. Okay, so I'm supposed to believe that the Germans, because the Nazis, this is where a lot of people get confused. The Nazis were just a political party. Okay, they might have had some secret society crap and all that weird stuff going on with the SS, but the point is the Nazis were a political party. The Germans themselves, the German people, are very technically savvy. Okay, and I'm supposed to believe that all these technological advances these people have, right? And then all of a sudden, in like the late 30s, 40s, even though there's patents, I think it was 1938 at the time, there's patents for one of these uranium enrichment processes they found in these old, German archives and stuff in their patent office or whatever. So there you go. You have this, 1938, this patent put in on an enrichment process, and then in 1940, they suddenly become mildly retarded until 1945, when suddenly their retardation goes away as soon as they start working for the United States, when we smuggled them over during Paperclip. So while this 5-year period, and I'm sure it goes back even further, but, mainstream history would have you believe that at least for 5-10 years, these scientists that were so
were able to accomplish nothing.
Yeah, suddenly became mildly retarded while they worked for the Nazis. And then only after they left working for the Nazis did this retardation suddenly go away, and epiphanies started coming in, one after the other like dominoes. I mean, come on. And then when you research it, you find out that, like I said, the Buna factory, the synthetic rubber factory that was right outside of Auschwitz there, when you research it, you realize that they probably really weren't even what you would need to enrich uranium is exactly what that plant had. It had access to water, slave labor, and massive power. That plant used more electricity than the entire city of Berlin.
Yeah, the resources they were throwing at this research were enormous. I mean, just to look at the resources they used to launch the V1 and V2 rockets. I mean, they were sucking up a massive. It took like 20,000 gallons of alcohol fuel to shoot one V2 rocket. And that was just on one level of their high advanced technology. Yeah, those plants and those research facilities were sucking up an enormous amount of German resources, and one reason that the German army was constantly shy of full supply throughout most of the war, because they were devoting so many resources to these projects that they thought would win them the war, and then they were later confiscated or taken over by the United States.
Yeah, and when people say, a lot of times you'll hear, "Oh, so what do you think? The Nazis run things?" No, I don't think the Nazis run things. I think that ideology was just picked up by certain people that were in power here already. The
Nazis served a purpose. I mean, they were there. They were originally started and financed by Wall Street as a foil against communism to keep the Soviet Union contained. Remember, a lot of high finance was really worried, although they had financed the Soviet Union and started it, they had financed Lenin in that sealed train from Germany to Moscow in World War I, and his takeover of Russia that led to the lack of involvement, the ending of the war on the Russian front for Germany, which later led to our inclusion in the war to fight off all those returning German troops from the Eastern Front. The Soviet Union still needed to be contained, so they built up the Nazi Party to contain the Soviet Union within their borders so that little experiment didn't get out of control. The Nazis served their purpose, and once they became inconvenient, they were discarded with. They're not running things, but a lot of those Nazis stayed within the power structure. The Odessa organization, the Society of Former Nazis and SS soldiers, intelligence professionals, that was flown out through rat lines after World War II and in Operation Paperclip and in their own protected routes. That organization survived World War II, collaborated with the CIA, and so forth. I mean, it's not that all of them were discarded, but that the useful ones were kept for the Cold War, to keep the Cold War going.
Yeah, and when you look at the space race, again, when you look through Jim Mars's books and Joseph Farrell's in particular, I can't urge people enough to get the books while they're out there. Two of the best books that you can get so far. I mean, there's a bunch of them, but if you want to get two books from Farrell and one from Mars, Rise of the Fourth Reich to start with, to understand what we're talking about, and Joseph Farrell's the Reich of the Black Sun and the SS Brotherhood of the Bell. And you'll come to find out that these guys were researching some really weird things. One of the things you come across is they were researching the SS. Now, when I say the SS, people have to understand that the SS was so secretive that anytime the Luftwaffe or any other organization within the hierarchy came up with some new type of technology, the SS came over and nailed it. And it was Kammler. I can't remember his exact title, but he was like the second in command at the SS, and he was in charge of all this secretive crap. He had his hands in everything, and he had all by the end of the war, he was in charge of every secret project, the atomic project, everything. They had things like what they called the America bomber. They flew.
A super bomber that would fly across the Atlantic to bomb New York City. Yes.
Yeah, they flew within 20 miles of New York and took photos of the skyline and flew back in a round trip flight.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, a test flight.
Mm-hmm. And they found this base. I can't remember where the exact spot was right now, but it was an air base, and it was so huge and so vast. It was like the biggest air base the entire Luftwaffe had in their whole arsenal. Biggest air base, just enormous. The bombers they had there, the amount of planes they had there. They realized that they were just waiting for the go-ahead to fly for an attack on New York City, because people thought that the United States was out of the reach. Maybe the West Coast with the Japanese, but surely not the East Coast. The Germans could never fly all the way across the Atlantic. We have all this, it's so vast, and we have all this control over there. We're over in France. They couldn't fly over top of that, but they did. They flew right over top of all of our stuff. All of our defenses came within 20 miles, shot pictures, and flew back. Now, this is interesting. How did they not get shot down? That's a pretty risky flight, even in World War II.
How did they escape the radar?
That's what I'm saying. How did they not get picked up on radar and get shot down? What about all the P-38s that were flying around? They flew out of the northern part of Europe. I forget exactly where it was, but they flew out of like the northern part over there. So that whole area was known. That was like P-38 lightning country. Those things would tear anything apart. How did they?
Well, at the end of the war, towards the end of the war, the Luftwaffe had been so much destroyed that pilots were looking for something to shoot down. Most of the Luftwaffe had been destroyed. So, I mean, there was plenty of available air fighters in the air looking for action.
We controlled the airspace, even over Germany at the end of the war.
Yes. I mean, it got so bad. I remember reading Chuck Yeager's biography, and he was talking about at the end of the war that they were just being given orders to strafe anything moving on the ground in Germany, and because there was nothing to shoot down.
Yeah, because they had decimated what once was a pretty advanced air force. You know, the Luftwaffe, and again, they weren't undisciplined, untrained pilots and stuff. So why would they have this huge air base just sitting there waiting?
Why was the Luftwaffe so poorly performing? Because its best talent and most of the resources were going towards these black projects they expected to win the war with. They were investing in these black projects to the detriment of the German Air Force in general.
Exactly. They put the I don't want to say crap, but they put the top guys in all the secret programs, and they took the stuff maybe in the middle section and put that out there to fight. And then when they got killed, the only thing they had left was the bottom of the barrel. Mm-hmm. And that's what's fighting and keeping the fight going. While you have all these secret projects going, and a lot of these crack pilots and stuff. When this airbase was, they were there on the airbase manning it until the Germans surrendered, and then they surrendered. And I mean, it was just filled with equipment and top-notch pilots and stuff. And it makes you wonder, what were they waiting for? And then you research you further, and you find out what they were playing with. I mean, we could have very well had a atomic bomb dropped on us, and they weren't dealing with the kind that got hurled from a cannon either. Okay, that was us. That was the Trinity tests. Hurling things from. We weren't doing that. Or they weren't doing that. Although they did have a problem with the delivery system. We had one aspect of the research. They had another aspect of it. Now,
but also after the Battle of Stalingrad, I believe in 1943, even the top-notch Nazis knew that the gig was up.
Oh yeah, dude, they knew it was.
So perhaps part of the deal was them restraining from using this high-level technology and shipping it over, giving it to the Allies in exchange for free passage.
Well, that's exactly what Mars had talked about, Joseph Farrell and others. Martin Bormann would have been smart enough, and when you research the stuff, he's the one that pretty much set up Odessa and set up all these rat lines.
He was Hitler's number 2 man. He was basically running the Reich because towards the end, Hitler was just a raving lunatic.
Oh yeah, well, they had him, Hitler's personal physician had him, he was doing cocaine eye drops. They were shooting him up with all sorts of crap. He was out of his friggin' mind. And, Bormann was running things. They knew like a year before Berlin fell that, it was going down the crapper. And they started making preparations back then because they knew that there was going to be issues. And they said, we got to go. We got to get out of here. And they started making the rat lines. They started making all these different corporations and hiding Nazi money amongst all these corporations in South America. Why do you think all the Nazis went to Argentina at the end of the war? They found Mengele down there. They found a village down there that it doesn't.
It's all German.
Yeah, not only is it all German, they could have, villagers that are brown skin, brown hair, and brown eyes, mate, and the kid comes out with blonde hair and blue eyes and white skin. But no, they weren't doing eugenics experiments.
Oh, of course not. And you know who was running American affairs for Central and South America during World War II? Rockefeller. He was in charge of the Central American office and South American office.
Gee, why does that not surprise me? Why does it not surprise me at all? Again,
it seems kind of strange because he was such a powerful family. I believe he later became a senator.
Well, think about this, dude.
Why was this guy running Central and South America during World War II when it seems like why wasn't he on running a war front?
Well, and how is that not a conflict of interest considering the Luftwaffe wouldn't have been able to fly had they not had a special additive in their oil made solely by U.S. Standard Oil of New Jersey, owned by none other than the Rockefeller family.
Yes, exactly, especially after Germany lost North Africa and access to the oil fields, and then the oil fields in Romania. How did they keep on going? They had no access to oil if it wasn't for the Rockefellers with the synthetic oil.
Yeah, they wouldn't have been able to get as far as they did at all. Their blitzkrieg attacks wouldn't have worked. Nothing. The Luftwaffe would not have been successful in any of their bombing campaigns. All that would not have been able to have been pulled off, and none of it would have been capable without the additive made by the Rockefeller U.S. Standard Oil.
I mean, these facts have been established. I mean, during Vietnam, it's
on record, dude. They supported the Soviets.
Yes, they supported the Soviets. We allowed there were U.S. companies selling to North Vietnam during the Vietnam War, selling them concrete and steel. They at the very top they run both sides.
During World War II, we were making fuses for Nazi artillery shells. Right here in America, we were manufacturing the fuses that were used in Nazi artillery shells, which were then lobbed at our boys. So think about the irony of that. Your son's off fighting in a war. You're working in a factory making the fuses that's going to be used to be put in the piece of artillery that's going to get used to shell your kid and kill him. But that's the American way. Be Rosie the Riveter. Woohoo! Take part in the military-industrial complex.
Exactly. At the very top, all these events are contrived, and that's not saying we're denigrating the sacrifice of the veterans of World War II, but they were being used. That war was unnecessary. World War I was unnecessary. It was not a natural outgrowth of human relations. They were contrived. And yes, the Nazis were horrible, and yes, the Japanese Empire was horrible, but they never would have been horrible had they not been financed from the beginning by international banks.
Exactly. And, when you research the Illuminati end of it and the secret society end of it, and you come across a man by the name of Albert Pike. And I've had people tell me that what I'm about to reference is not real and it's been debunked. And no, it hasn't. I've looked at the supposed debunking of it because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't promoting something false. And guess what? The quote-unquote debunking is crap. Okay, so from the evidence that I've seen, it's real. And until I see otherwise, I will keep that train of thought. If I come across something that can definitively prove it's not real, so be it. But I haven't come across it yet. So, and what? Oh, excuse me. Good thing we're recording this. I need a drink. Much better. All right. What I'm referencing is the letter, this famous letter that was written by Albert Pike. And I have an article referencing this up on federaljack.com. It's called Albert Pike and His Three World Wars. And in this letter, he describes pretty much how they're going to lay out, they're going to create a one world government via, creating these wars, and bring in, just like they have with the United Nations so far. So he said that, World War I was going to get started a certain way, and there was an outcome. World War II was going to get started, and there was an outcome, and World War III was going to get started, and there was an outcome. And World War I and World War II have both started almost to the exact T that he described in this letter. And the outcome, obviously, the First World War was to try to push for something like the League of Nations. The U.S. didn't go for it. There was a lot of other people that didn't go for it. Bam, out comes World War II, and the United Nations is born. Now, World War III, he specifically mentioned they were going to get the Jews and the Arabs at each other's throat and have them wipe each other out. And what do you see in the Middle East today?
Exactly. And, of course, the State of Israel was born just after World War II, largely as a result of the Holocaust in Europe, which, of course, we made no effort to stop at any times. Roosevelt could have bombed the tracks leading into those camps at any moment he wished. We owned the air.
And again, does anybody even know what the term Holocaust actually means? Do you know what it means? I know what it means.
Sacrifice by fire.
Yes. So who in their right mind would benefit from some sort of fiery sacrifice of human lives? Oh, these sick people that worship Satan or whoever the hell that they... And I'm not talking about, some goth kids or, some stupid kid that, some 16-year-old kid that's, playing with a Ouija board. I'm talking about people that really put robes on and play with daggers and do human sacrifice to whoever. It doesn't matter if they think it's Satan or Nimrod or, Molech, Minerva. It doesn't matter who they're doing it to. They're doing it. Okay, these are like ancient deities 4,000 or 5,000 years old in some cases, at least, going back to Sumer and this, the ancient Sumerian culture and Babylon. And these people believe that's who they're sacrificing these people to. So I'm not saying that Eisenhower might have thought that, but people that controlled him could have said no. See, Eisenhower wasn't a field general. A lot of people think that he was, some great field general.
When World War II started, Eisenhower was a lieutenant colonel.
Yeah, he was nothing. Okay, he suddenly rose up through another one who kind of rose up through the ranks out of nowhere. And a great book to read for people is Target Patton. Great book by Robert Wilcox. And actually, if you want, I'll throw you his email, Holland.
Sure, yeah.
You can interview him. He's a wealth of information about this stuff with World War II. And I know you love this stuff. When you get in and you look at you read his book, he talks about how Patton was referencing Eisenhower as being a moron, and Bradley too. Omar Bradley wasn't this great general. He sucked too. He was under Patton. Patton was the guy that was the top of the food chain, if anything. That guy had a brass set of balls and he knew how to fight. And maybe sometimes he could be a little bit rough,
harsh.
He did slap a soldier. He's famous for slapping a soldier who had shell shock and told him to stop being a pussy. Pretty much. All right, I understand. With what I know about PTSD nowadays, you could look at it and say, "Oh, that's horrible." But this was World War II. It was a different time, and Patton was a different man. He was a man's man.
Patton started off his Army career chasing Mexican bandits on the border on a horse. He was definitely old school.
Yeah, dude, he was he was of the same mindset of Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders. Mm-hmm. This guy was not. Today you could look at it and go, "Oh my God, that's horrible." Again, hindsight's 20/20, and this was, he was old school. That's the only way I could put it. It's like we used to say when I was in the Guard.
It wasn't perfect. But what we're saying is that he was actually on the ball when it came to World War II. He was upset that he was not being allowed to drive towards Berlin as fast as he could, and he wanted to turn his army on the Soviet Union, which he could have. The Red Army, at the conclusion of World War II, was a shambles.
Oh, dude, they were decimated. They were destroyed.
They had been redlining the entire time. And the whole myth about Russia having this massive army poised to pour across Western Europe was largely invented by Gehlen, the former head of German intelligence, who went through paperclip and became one of the CIA's most trusted assets. He was inflating the Soviet threat in the years after World War II to promote the World War and to prevent people like Patton from going across and taking charge and ending both fascism and communism in one fell swoop. They needed the Cold War to further their goals.
Well, and what's even more interesting, I just stumbled across this through Joseph Farrell's research, is when he turned from Berlin, they went up towards Pilsen. And they said they were chasing the running Nazis. That's what the official story is, that they wanted Patton and his Third Army to run down the escaping Nazis and not let them get away, and if they were running, kill them. And that's a quote unquote official history. But up in that area was where a lot of these these SS secret weapons factories were.
Yeah, the latter end of the wartime strategy for the Allied powers really doesn't quite make strategic or tactical sense unless you look at it in the lens of they were working to secure these areas where these top secret research facilities were, which were tended to be away from the battlefields, away from where the fight was. And so it didn't quite make sense, some of these moves, especially Patton being sent in a part of Germany for no reason, where there was no Germans to fight, but it was full of these facilities with this top secret technology.
Yeah, and of course they'd want his guys to do it. And then that brings up the question, because when you research, this is why I brought up Wilcox. Well, two reasons, because his work dovetails into the Japanese A-bomb research, which dovetails obviously into the German research, because the Japs got all their technology advancements during World War II came from the Germans. They had this thing going on where Germany would share stuff with Italy and Japan. The three of them would share stuff with each other. But, let's be honest, the main burden was being put on the Germans, and they exported all this technology and stuff to the Japs. But Wilcox, the other way he dovetails into this is he wrote about the assassination of Patton. And when you read this book, Target Patton, I'm telling you, to the listeners and Holland, if you ever get a chance, when you get a chance to talk to Wilcox, he'll tell you, and maybe he'll even throw you a copy of the book. But it's just impressive work because he spent a couple of years researching it, and you realize that definitely after you see the evidence that's there, there's definitely something shady going on, and it does look like he was killed. There's a couple culprits that it could be, but the evidence is there that he was taken out. Now, there's multiple reasons why some people say, well, he was taken out because he wanted to go to to fight to war with the Russians, and he was going to come back and he was going to open his mouth and tell everything. I think that it's a bit of all of it. And I'll tell you my hypothesis on it. Now, I could be wrong, but this is just from the research, I spent about 3 years now studying Patton's death and, in this end of World War II. I've been studying World War II since I was like 5. And when you look into it, you realize that if he went up there towards Pilsen, right, and he went up there where these secret weapons factories were, the Third Army would have found it. Now, his guys, compartmentalization, easy. You shut up, or you lose your benefits, your family, whatever, the deal. Shut your effing mouth. You know how they handle us, the grunts, the enlisted personnel. They don't care. He's an officer. And Patton's got a brass set that wouldn't fit in a dump truck. He didn't listen to Eisenhower half the time during World War II. So what makes them think he's already precedent has been set? He's going to, the chance is there that he could say something, right? So he knows about all this secret weapons and everything. Now he wants to go kick the Russians' asses. They say no, they're arguing. So that he gets demoted, whatever, all this. They think they're going to be able to put him in a spot and control him and keep his mouth shut. He's not. Now he gets so pissed off at what they're doing to him. He says, you know what? I don't need my army pension.
He was quite a wealthy man. He was from a distinguished family in Virginia, and his wife was kind of wealtty too. Yeah, in fact, that's I think he was listed as the richest general in the army.
Well, yeah. See, there you go. See, he didn't need this money. He wasn't beholden to the retiree pay. So he says, he basically said, look, I don't need my pension, and being a rather rich individual, and his wife was well off. He's going to go home and say, I'm not worried. I'm going to go home and I'm going to run for office. And I'm going to tell everybody what I know. And I'll get in and I'm going to knock this crap off and I'll do whatever. Now, whether or not he might have been right in his thoughts on everything, that's regardless. The point is he knew too much. And I think he knew way too much about the secret weapons factories. And I think they were scared that he was going to come back here and open his mouth and be an unstoppable force. And I'm sure Eisenhower was willing to go along with anything because he had political aspirations. And then look at the end of his presidency. Look how beat down he looked, Holland.
And well, look at the last act of his presidency when he warned the country about the military-industrial complex. Obviously, the man who was the supreme commander of Allied forces in Europe, fighting Nazi Germany, the pinnacle of the army and the military. He was a 5-star general, for God's sakes, a general of the army. And he is warning us about the military-industrial complex because he had seen it at work. He could do nothing about it. I mean, he was an old man. If he tried to get too big for his britches, he would die of a heart attack in office, an induced heart attack, mind you. But he would not be allowed to affect any real change. I mean, presidents are powerless, especially after Kennedy. And so, of course, but he did. I'll give the man this. He did blow the whistle to the best extent he could in his farewell address when he warned the country very specifically about the military-industrial complex. And this is a man who had seen the inside, had done many dirty things, had gone along with things that he didn't agree with many times. Perhaps that's one reason he was elected president was during World War II and later Korea. He kept his mouth shut about the number of American POWs that were not returned from World War II and not returned from Korea. During World War II, most of the American POWs held in German POW camps that were liberated by the Russians, most of those GIs and airmen never came home. They were shipped off to work camps in the Soviet Union. They were listed off as dead or their numbers just scrubbed from the rolls. And that was tens of thousands of American servicemen who had been shot down or captured in battle, wounded in battle and then captured, or just captured or surrendered or whatever.
and they were shipped off to the Gulag, to Russian work camps. And maybe that's another reason Patton had to be taken out, because if you can give Patton anything, he would never have allowed that to happen. He would never leave a man behind. He would never leave his men behind.
They had already previously raided a prison camp where he was told not to, and he was like, he gave his superiors the big middle finger and took his guys and said, we're gonna go raid this camp and we're gonna free our boys. And they all went, let's go.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. He would never stand by for that. And here you have Eisenhower, who did. He was fully knowledgeable about what was going on, but he was ordered, or perhaps by his own volition, didn't want to start another war with Russia. He wrote them off as a loss of war that could not be helped. And that kind of mindset obviously marked him for the presidency. And he later pulled similar shenanigans at the end of the Korean War, when thousands of American POWs held in North Korean camps had been shipped to Siberia and to China, tens of thousands. That came out on CBS News like 10 years ago, verified. The Forgotten Soldiers, I believe the book was called, which is a mainstream published book, and then received a lot of play in the media. Tens of thousands of American soldiers shipped off to China and Russia during the Korean War, never returned at all.
They're still finding remains of POWs over in Vietnam. And of course, there's the big scandal that when Clinton, when he was in office, again, here we go, dovetailing right back to the same scumbags. When he was in office, he signed a treaty or whatever the hell it was. I don't think it was a treaty, but whatever it was.
Opened up trade with Vietnam.
Yes, that's like most favored nation status or something to that effect.
I believe there had been an embargo, but we actually became...
Oh, maybe that's what it was. Whatever it was, it's for trade. So they opened up, trade again, and, everything's hunky-dory with Vietnam again. And then we're still living POWs over there from the end of the Vietnam War. And Clinton, they couldn't bring them home now.
They don't want to jeopardize that. And
they didn't want to bring them home now either because
it would prove decades of denials a lie. Bo Greitz talked about that, how he was sent on a rescue mission after the Vietnam War into a country that was neighboring Vietnam, and his team witnessed and photographed American POWs being held in these camps 10 years after the war, 15 years after. He radioed it in, and they ordered him to take out the American POWs, not to rescue them, to kill them. They were witnesses to a massive lie and a cover-up. I mean, the fact that American POWs were left behind cannot be disputed. I mean, the numbers don't make sense from the rolls of the returnees. There are tens of thousands of American servicemen who were captured, then never released, never reported dead, even though they're seen by their fellow prisoners. Then they're shipped off to other camps and never seen again. Their remains are never returned, and they're witnessed. I mean, there's the witnesses who have seen American POWs in Vietnam and neighboring countries after the Vietnam War ended is legion and is covered up.
Yep. And they don't want you to know that those guys were there for that period of time, because then that just goes to show that they've been lying this whole time. And then people are going to say, well, why were you lying? What else are you lying about?
They're also lying because part of the peace treaty that Nixon signed with Vietnam included billions of dollars of reparations. Nixon was so desperate to end the war that he signed it. Of course, that would never pass through Congress. There's no political reality of right after the Vietnam War of giving American tax dollars to North Vietnam for reconstruction. That's just not going to happen. So it was never paid. And so North Vietnam held on to the prisoners. That was their bargaining chip. We wrote them off because it was politically unpopular to pursue that issue, and they were left for dead. And they had signed up as young Americans to serve this country, to protect this country. And they fought, and they were captured and tortured, and they were literally abandoned by our politicians.
Yep, because like Kissinger said, military men are just, what he calls
dumb, stupid animals.
Stupid animals.
You sacrifice as pawns.
That's right. Dumb, stupid animals to be sacrificed as pawns. And, it's a little weird because he's an Army vet. Although he was an officer.
Well, he was in intelligence, counterintelligence, and he was stationed in Germany where he helped debrief the Nazis at Nuremberg.
Interesting. See, I think I kind of wonder if he was put into a position of power in the Army and in that specific position because, of him being in either a bloodline or in service,
Well, I mean, they take all comers, man. They do. If you're smart enough and you're willing to play ball and you have dirt on you so you can be controlled, they will use you. And you will go also all the way to the top. Not quite to the top, but you'll rise in the ranks as long as you're useful.
Actually, it's more like rise to the bottom. all the crap settles to the bottom, and then they stick a ladle in and scoop it out, and that's what they try to use. We've touched on a broad variety of things tonight, and it all dovetails. Everything dovetails one into the other. And again, even though we kind of took a side trip down into some alternative. I don't want to say alternative history, but the reality of World War II, I should say. We took a side trip into unknown history of World War II. There is still many, many different things that we didn't get a chance to cover tonight, and that I urge people to educate yourselves on. I mean, Holland and I could sit here for 8 more hours and go over everything, verbatim. But it still wouldn't. I wouldn't want you to believe it word for word. I urge you to go research it yourself. And in that vein, I really think people need, at least right now, because of what's going on, I think they really need to look at the history of these. Let's say, not even false flag terror events. Let's narrow it down. These mass shootings, right? People need to look at this stuff. They need to look at the history again. Go back to '97 and look at how the North Hollywood shootout rolled out and played out. Look how the Columbine shootings. You brought up a good point the other day on Alex's show, and I mentioned it a couple times on some earlier shows I did, where every time they wanted to ban guns in all these other countries, Australia, the UK. They had mass shootings, and if one wasn't enough, they'd have 2 or 3 until they got enough people pissed and frightened.
Exactly. And that's how it's going to play out here. They're not going to stop. They've already invested in blood with these shootings. They're not going to stop, and the guns must be banned. That must happen before they move into the new paradigm, because there are certain things that a lot of Americans simply are just not going to take. But if they are disarmed, they'll have to take them. The guns must go away, and we've seen it in other first world countries, English-speaking countries in the Western Hemisphere, that they must take the guns. And how do they do it in Australia and Britain? Horrific mass shootings. They will continue to do this, but that puts us info warriors on alert. We are on alert. We know it's going to happen. It could happen in our hometown, in your hometown. When it does happen, you start recording every bit of local footage. You get out there with your own camera and take your own interviews, get your own footage, see what's going down, get that information out there, record it, put it out on the web, put it out on whatever venue you got, and make it explode. This is the war we're fighting. I mean, we're on watch. We're on watch right now. We're on the wall, waiting for the attack, waiting for the next one. And we're on the ball. So, I mean, and we are winning. We are winning this. We've countered them at every corner. We have busted them, and we must continue doing so.
I agree. We got to stay on point, man, because they're going to continue to do this. I foresee them pulling something else off. I hope it doesn't happen, but I mean, I could hope in one hand and or wish in one hand and crap in the other, and tell me which one weighs more. I don't see them just sitting back on their laurels now. I mean, like you said, they've already invested blood. There's no turning back. Once you take that step, it's not like they're going to turn back now and sit back on the couch and say, okay, we'll rest for a little while. They've already killed people, not once, but twice, if not more. So what's to stop them from doing it again and again and again? And then they'll just keep saying, oh my God, it's the guns. Oh my God, it's the guns. Oh my God, it's the guns. They'll never question whether it's society. They'll never question whether or not it's actually being controlled by certain individuals, even if it wasn't the gun, even if it wasn't people being controlled, and it was, but it wasn't the guns. Okay, let's remove the guns out of the picture. Let's remove the control, the conspiracy out of the picture for a minute, and let's just look at one of the main ingredients: society. Why don't we ever look at what the hell is wrong with society, Holland? Why don't we ever look and say, wow, What is wrong with the way we think?
Because, I mean, here's the thing. Yeah, I mean, gun violence is a horrible thing, but it is a symptom. Removing that does not remove the problem. And you can contrast that with, we can look at other, times in this history when gun ownership and exposure to guns was much greater than today. I mean, my stepdad used to take his deer rifle to school and stick it in the high school locker. Of course, this is in rural Oklahoma. But I mean, back in my granddad's day, you could go to Ace Warehouse and buy a stick of dynamite and a blasting cap off the shelf. Put down your dime, and you have a bomb. And there was not terrorism, people blowing each other up. It is a societal problem that produces gun violence. And look at the societies today. Look at Switzerland. In Switzerland, every household is almost required to have an automatic military assault rifle, not these military sporting arms that we're allowed to buy here in this country, a military assault rifle. By law, they must have it there, full automatic, and there is no corresponding gun violence. So obviously, even on the lack of conspiracy argument, just the apparent gun control argument, it is false. Because the guns are not the cause of the violence. There are other causes, and I'm not sure exactly what they are, but I'm sure it has to do with the state of this society, the state of law enforcement, the state of opportunities for people to express themselves without feeling miserable, and the divisiveness, and the government inventing divisiveness and promoting all of these things that produces the gun violence. It is not the guns, because in other test tubes around the nation and in history where guns are part of the equation, you don't see the gun violence. So the gun control argument itself is devoid.
Well, actually,
shallow.
That whole Aurora, Colorado shooting, I've said this multiple times, it actually proves that their police state doesn't work. That's their surveillance cameras, being everywhere, looking down people's pants and everything else, does not work. And it proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that gun control zones don't work. Because, see, the only place that these shootings ever seem to happen, Holland, is in gun control or gun-free zones, where no one has a gun except for the psycho that comes in to shoot everyone, and nobody can return fire. Can you imagine if they tried one of these well-coordinated attacks with multiple shooters, even though there's technically only one, right? According to the official story, but we'll say in reality there are multiple shooters. What would happen if you had 4 or 5 guys that were armed in there and they took down 2 of the shooters? Well, then there goes the whole lone gunman theory, right? Because now you have physical evidence that there's 2 dead guys that they shot. So they have to go into a place where nobody can defend themselves. Mm-hmm. I said the other day when the Sikh shooting first happened, I sat back, I didn't want to jump into it, and start saying, "Oh my God, they're staging it," because if they're not, then you're going to look like a buffoon, and you shouldn't do that anyway. You want to,
you should get the evidence first.
Exactly. Anyway. So I gave it like 2 days before, and I usually give it 72 hours. Within 2 days, I was like, no, this is definitely staged, and this is before I knew about the cameras not working, or any of the other shady things that were going on. But there was just a few red flags about it right off the bat. I mean, I was on air when it happened. I should say I went on air a couple hours after it happened, and it was still unfolding. And I played the thing from the chief of police, and he says there's one definitely down. There might be more. They're not sure. They're getting reports of it. And then within no time flat, it went from multiple shooters to 1 shooter. And the one thing that I called out right away, I said, that Sikh temple, again, these shootings only happen in specific places.
Yeah, churches are gun-free zones.
Yeah, and those people are peaceful as hell. That's akin to a gun-free zone. None of them are going to have a gun on them. They don't believe in violence. So
even if they do, they have a 4-man team to take care of any random factors that may arise.
Well, that's why you have a 4-man team in there. Mm-hmm. That's why you have more than one guy going in. So if somebody does try to be a hero, he gets taken out. Exactly. And he just ends up.
That's probably why there were reports of multiple shooters at the Tucson shooting, because it is an open carry state. So gun ownership is pretty prevalent, and there was a good chance there might have been a person with a gun on the scene.
Well, that's how they got him, because one of the guys that helped subdue him was a guy that had a concealed weapons permit.
Yeah, but that guy's that he didn't use it. He didn't use his gun. He tackled Jared Lee Loughner, and then later in the footage, he's shown in a uniform helping load some of the victims onto the ambulance. So I believe he was a planted media management asset, according to Stephanie Sled. She's viewed the footage. It is him on the day at the scene in two different types of clothing, one of them a uniform, and for some reason he had a concealed carry, was carrying a pistol, but chose not to draw it.
Very interesting. Holland, there's so many inconsistencies with all these things. I mean, we could sit here for hours and point them out, man. I would say that the only way people are going to be able to see this stuff is for themselves, and they have to at least do the research where people like yourself, Stephanie, and others have pointed out, inconsistencies. They need to go look at the stuff that I've pointed out and say, oh, wow, that is kind of weird. Where can people go? Because I know Stephanie's a really good writer. Where can they get read her articles and stuff? Because I know she's on point with this.
Oh yeah, if you want to check out the Jared Lee Loughner shooting in Tucson, Arizona, of last year, go to thegovernmentrag.com, thegovernmentrag.com, which is a news feed site, but she also has her reports on there. She runs the site. She has her multiple reports there on the Jared Lee Loughner shooting. I think her first report is called Apple Zebra 11, and it's very well done research on the ground. She actually went out to Arizona, interviewed many of these people, and she's got the goods on Tucson and Arizona and Jared Lee Loughner, that's for sure. So that's thegovernmentrag.com. I repeat, thegovernmentrag.com, because it's always that time of the month.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, Holland, I'm going to wrap it up because I know you're exhausted, brother. And you put in almost an extra 2 hours here with me for the after show tonight. So I'm sure the listeners will really appreciate all the extra stuff that we went into. And I know Holland and I threw out a ton of information, ladies and gentlemen. But again, it all dovetails into one another. There's just so much to it. And Holland is such a well-researched individual that, again, I could sit down with him and we could talk about anything. So I will be, Holland, the door's always open. And, whenever you have a free spot, sometime within the next few weeks, I'm going to have you back on again. And, we'll cover, there's just so many different things we can get into. And I'll have you back on again. I want you to go ahead and give yourself shameless plugs for your radio show, the websites, any upcoming events or screenings of the film, anything like that. So go ahead and give yourself some shameless plugs.
Okay, well, I'm Holland Vandennieuwenhof, writer and producer for Free Mind Films. We released A Noble Lie, Oklahoma City, in 1995, in December of last year, just before the beginning of this year. A Noble Lie is an examination of the Oklahoma City bombing in the light of critical evidence that calls into question, with great authority, the official story. That is the story of the Oklahoma City bombing. We can take pride that the story can never be told again without a noble lie being part of the equation. We have reclaimed history from the lie with first-hand eyewitness accounts, expert testimony, destroying the official story of that day on April 19th, 1995. Also, I am a radio talk show host in my own right on the Logos Radio Network at logosradionetwork.com on Mondays, 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time. And I discuss a variety of issues, much like this show here on Popeye, Down the Rabbit Hole with Popeye. So anyways, just check out my work. Please keep supporting our efforts. We are fighting the good fight, and appreciate all of the attention that I've received with my work. It's this year has been a really good year in that respect. I've been kind of, trudging in the background and really providing a lot of ammunition, but now I'm actually on the front lines. And I'm glad. I'm glad for everyone's support. So please check me out at freemindreport.com for my talk show host, and of course, unknowablelie.com for the movie.
And I have to say, the movie's incredible, and I give it my full support. And I say, yes, go to unknowablelie.com and, dude, just purchase a copy of the film. I mean, it's $15, and you know what? You'll have it. It's part of history. And how many people could you wake up with it? Do screenings. And Holland, I really appreciate you coming on and doing the after show for like almost an extra 2 hours with me, bro. I mean, it's not easy to do 2 hours of radio, let alone 4. So I really appreciate it, man.
Well, I appreciate you, Popeye. You've given me a lot of exposure, and frankly, I love being on your show. It's always a good conversation, and I love talking to you and just getting the information out.
Well, dude, you know the door is always open here for you. You have a pretty much a chair in the studio whenever you want. You're more than welcome to come on the show. Having you on, it makes it much easier to get the information out because you understand a lot of this. I shouldn't say a lot of it. You understand everything pretty much that I do. You're not a researcher that, I could say something that might, I brought up the fact that, what's his name? Rhodes thought that, thinks that lizard people rule the world or whatever. You understand that I'm not saying that, I believe that, but you're understanding that that is part of this equation, whether it sounds insane or not. That's what some of these morons believe. You're well researched enough that you understand, you know what I mean, where I'm going with that. So it makes it makes for a much easier flow of information. So whenever you want to come back on, dude, you're more than welcome. The door is always open to you, and we could pull up virtual chairs, pull up our virtual beers or coffee or whatever, and just sit and let the information flow. You're always welcome here, dude.
Well, thank you very much, Popeye, and it's been a pleasure. And thank you once again we've become friends over this short period of months of me appearing on your show, and one day we will break bread together. I promise that.
I wholeheartedly concur. I agree 110%, Holland. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening.